Chapter 107. If it weren't for the 20 balls of light flying in all directions in the distant sky, Long Houchen would have thought that he had returned to the dream forest. The green light had disappeared and turned into a pale green ball of light floating behind him. Ling Xiao told him that if he wanted to return to the dream temple, he needed to inject at least 5,000 spiritual power into the ball of light. After the infusion of spiritual power, he would have to undergo the final test of the dream paradise. Only those who passed could return smoothly. However, if he used the dream gem, he would return directly. The 20 balls of light in the distant sky instantly attracted Long Houchen's attention. Of course, he knew what they were. Ling Xiao carefully told them that these balls of light were the spiritual stoves that appeared in the dream temple. They would appear the moment they entered the dream paradise, and then scatter to various locations in the dream paradise. Therefore, it was the best time to observe their position. However, Long Houchen didn't follow them immediately. He only took a careful look and roughly memorized the direction of the balls of light. He stood in place and urged the spiritual power in his body to rush to his chest. Frankly speaking, Long Houchen was very nervous at this time. He wasn't sure if he could contact the Tower of Eternity in the dream paradise. After all, this was a place left behind by the goddess of nature, and the Tower of Eternity was created by the necromancer. Even if he guessed that the Tower of Eternity itself was a divine artifact, it was definitely inferior to the goddess of nature. In this case, it was hard to say if he could contact the Tower of Eternity through the dream paradise. If he failed, the previous arrangements would be useless. This was also an important reason why Long Houchen came here with Kai and didn't let Kai give up the competition. If Kai entered the dream paradise with him, even if they couldn't contact the Tower of Eternity, at least 2 of them would come in and fight for more spiritual stoves. On the other hand, if he was alone, he definitely couldn't take more. This was related to the final test and crisis that Ling Xiao had sternly warned them about. A faint light flashed, and Long Houchen's eyes revealed a cold divine light. A golden halo began to spread from his chest. It was the eternal melody. In this fantasy paradise, there were 4 types of elements: light element, water element, earth element, and the rare wood element. It was a special element that belonged to nature. The wood element was especially powerful in places where there were plants. On the other hand, it would be greatly weakened. It was also known as the life element. Most of the spiritual stoves scattered in the air just now were of these 4 attributes. At this time, under the attraction of the eternal melody, dense light elements rushed towards Long Houchen. The burning heat in his chest became more and more intense, and everything around him became illusory. Long Houchen felt the changes in his body nervously. Maybe it was because he was in the dream paradise, but this time he actually felt the process of the rules of space being destroyed. The dense light elements released by the eternal melody were quietly opening a door. Moreover, in the process of opening this space door, it was completely in accordance with the rules of the fluctuations of the light elements in the dream paradise. It gave people the feeling that this door itself was a part of the dream paradise. The space door slowly opened, but Long Houchen's spiritual power was also being consumed at an alarming rate. In the past, when he opened the passage to the Tower of Eternity, he didn't consume any spiritual power. But this time, almost half of his spiritual power was consumed in an instant, and it was still increasing. The feeling of being out of control made Long Houchen's forehead start to ooze cold sweat. The situation he didn't want to see the most was to exhaust all his spiritual power and still not be able to complete the communication with the Tower of Eternity. Fortunately, his luck was good. Just when his spiritual power was about 1,000, his figure suddenly became illusory. With a flash of golden light, he disappeared into thin air. The next moment, the familiar smell of death filled the air and surrounded his body. But the eternal melody also began to quickly absorb the exclusive light elements of the Tower of Eternity to help him restore his spiritual power. Success. Long Houchen was overjoyed and quickly walked into the Tower of Eternity. His companions were already waiting here. They all came in their best state. After waiting in this place filled with the smell of death for so long, they were already a little anxious. Seeing Long Houchen appear, they were naturally elated. "Boss, it's done?" Sima Xian asked eagerly. Long Houchen nodded and said, "It should be no problem. It's just that the process of teleportation needs to consume a lot of my spiritual power. Teleportation with you may also increase the consumption. I'll first recover my cultivation, then we'll go immediately. Time waits for no man. Those people in Fantasy Paradise must have already started to take action. If they didn't hurry, they might fall into the hands of others. After all, there were only so many spiritual stoves, and no one would be satisfied with just one." Sitting cross-legged, Long Houchen fully opened up his spiritual power and quickly restored his spiritual power. However, even with his cultivation, without Yiting's help, it took him a full hour to restore the spiritual power he had previously consumed. "Come on, Lin Xian, give me some more great recovery pills. I don't know how much spiritual power it will take to teleport you back." After receiving the great recovery pills from Lin Xian, Long Houchen led his companions out of the Tower of Eternity and immediately activated the teleportation. As he expected, it was equally difficult to teleport back, and the consumption was great. After taking 6 great recovery pills and exhausting their own spiritual power, they were finally teleported back under the illusory golden light. The light flashed, and the rich and fresh air suddenly blew into their faces. Everyone's spirit was lifted. "Is this Fantasy Paradise? It's really beautiful," Chen Ying'er said with a face full of admiration. Long Houchen said, "Follow me closely, we must immediately rush to find the spiritual stoves. It's a little late now, I hope our luck is good. Let's go." As he spoke, he didn't even rest to restore his spiritual power. He immediately led his companions to identify a direction and quickly moved forward. At the same time, the light elemental spirit Yiting was also released by him to help him restore his spiritual power. In an environment like Fantasy Paradise, his speed of restoring spiritual power was much faster than in the Tower of Eternity. With the dual effects of Eternal Melody and Yiting, plus his own spiritual aperture, he didn't need to deliberately rest. After all, he only consumed spiritual power, but his spirit was still strong. The direction that Long Houchen chose was very particular, because in his previous observation, it was obviously impossible to remember the attributes of so many spiritual stoves in an instant. But he could remember the direction that most of the spiritual stoves flew to. At this time, he chose the direction that had the most spiritual stoves flying to, and it seemed that the distance between them wasn't too big, which made it possible for them to find more spiritual stoves. Long Houchen found that when his companions followed him here, each of them also had a green light ball next to them. Obviously, after obtaining the spiritual stoves here, it was impossible to use the Tower of Eternity to teleport everyone away. Because once they obtained the spiritual stoves, it was equivalent to completing the communication with the Dream Temple, and they had to pass the test of the Dream Temple before they could leave this place. This was because once they obtained the spiritual stoves, it was equivalent to completing the communication with the Dream Temple, and they had to pass the test of the Dream Temple before they could leave this place. This problem had also been considered by Long Houchen. If everyone obtained the spiritual stoves and passed the test, then before leaving the Dream Temple, they would be teleported to the Tower of Eternity. The demons were watched by the Alliance, so they didn't dare to rashly approach the Dream Temple. According to Ling Zhao's grandfather, the Dream Temple had a very strict limit of 10,000 spiritual power points. In the past, there was a rank 9 powerhouse who almost died here, but luckily he was able to escape in time. Although Kai wasn't here at this time, the 6 of them naturally maintained their usual battle formation. Long Haochen was in front, Sima Xian and Wang Yuanyuan were on the left and right, Lin Xian and Chen Ying'er were in the middle, and Han Yu was at the back. Dream Paradise could really be said to be heaven on earth. Everywhere they passed, all kinds of rare plants could be seen. Lin Xian called everyone to stop and pick some precious plants that he recognized from time to time. Looking at his beaming face, it was obvious that they had a good harvest. Long Haochen didn't rush him. For his companions, the first priority in entering Dream Paradise was to ensure that everyone returned safely, and then think of ways to obtain some benefits. These herbs could be obtained directly, so naturally, they had to be picked first. As for the spiritual stoves, that would depend on luck. Just like that, everyone walked and stopped. Since they had identified a direction, they just had to keep moving forward. Sure enough, it was impossible to fly in Dream Paradise. Even Yiting, who could completely integrate into the environment here, could only fly about 5 meters at most before she would be restrained and fall. However, her existence was of great help to Long Haochen. After coming here, Yiting's ability seemed to have been strengthened to a certain extent. At the very least, the effect of the previous spirit-gathering halo was nearly twice as good as usual. In less than a quarter of an hour, Long Haochen's consumed spiritual power was all replenished. Moreover, through Yiting, Long Haochen's perception could be enhanced exponentially, and he could feel the spiritual power fluctuations within a radius of at least a kilometer. Strange and precious plants, as well as a clear stream, shuttled through the forest. From time to time, a faint mist appeared, and every time it brought hazy beauty to everyone. The mist was not a combination of dust and water, but a true pure liquid element. The light element's mist was pale gold, the wood element's was pale green, the water element's was pale blue, and the earth element's was pale yellow. Occasionally, colors representing other attributes could be seen. It was like a dream and exceptionally moving. Moreover, if one walked into the mist of the same attribute as one's, they would immediately feel refreshed. The spiritual power in their body fluctuated violently, and there was even a faint effect of improvement. It gave people a feeling that they couldn't wait to sit down and cultivate. Unfortunately, this mist of light could float, and it was very difficult to sit down and absorb it. Only Long Haochen was an exception, because he didn't need to absorb anything himself. Yiting could directly absorb it in the light golden mist of the light attribute. In just a short while, she had already absorbed 3 balls of light golden mist. Her body, which had almost materialized, was thick and bright gold. Pure light elements were constantly transmitted into Long Haochen's body through the contract connection between her and Long Haochen. Long Haochen was surprised to find that, under such circumstances, his spiritual power was increasing all the time. Although it wasn't very fast, it was still much faster than normal cultivation. Unfortunately, Illusory Paradise opened once every 100 years, and it was only open for 3 days. Otherwise, if he could cultivate in this environment, he believed that he would be able to break through to the 7th rank in less than a year. As they continued forward, everyone's mood gradually calmed down. This place was really too beautiful. Even a boy like Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but exclaim, if every mission could be carried out in this environment, then there wouldn't be a need to rest at all. The colorful mist of light, set off by the rare plants, made people unable to look too far, but the comfortable and leisurely feeling made everyone want to stay here forever. But Long Haochen clearly didn't have this intention. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate the environment here, but because he was more worried about Kai. He always felt a little empty in his heart when Kai wasn't with him. Suddenly, Long Haochen stopped in his tracks and made a stop gesture to his companions. His eyes narrowed slightly as he concentrated on feeling something. There is a strong spiritual fluctuation in front of us on the left. It seems that someone is fighting. Let's go and take a look. Everyone, pay attention to hiding and listen to my orders. At this point, Long Haochen couldn't help but flash a cold, murderous intent. His companions were brought in by the Tower of Eternity. The demons didn't know, and this matter must not be known to the demons as much as possible. Otherwise, he was afraid that it would provoke another war between the Alliance and the demons. Therefore, before he set off, he told his companions that once they were discovered by the demons, they were to kill the opponent immediately. They even had to do it before collecting the spiritual stove. Quietly moving forward, Wang Yuanyuan released some spatial spiritual power to isolate the airflow in the air. Han Yu had quietly summoned his evil eye. Long Haochen's perception of weak spiritual power had a range of 1 kilometer. In the state of battle, he could feel the violent fluctuations of spiritual power from at least 2 kilometers away. The further they went, the denser the bushes and trees became. Gradually, the sound of battle had reached everyone's ears. At this time, Long Haochen stopped and made a gesture to his companions, telling them to hide and wait for his orders. Then, he released Blue Rain, Hibiscus of Light, and took Light's punishment. With 2 swords in both hands, he quietly sneaked in the direction of the sound. Although he was not an assassin, he could still hide his aura with precise control of spiritual power. The closer he got, the clearer his perception became. It was just ahead. In a flash, Long Haochen quickly climbed up a big tree. In the process of climbing, he found that even if he was climbing a tree, there would be a solid pressure in the air after climbing more than 5 meters, causing his spiritual power to continue to be consumed. But now was not the time to care so much. When he was near the top of the tree, he finally saw who the 2 sides were from the gaps of the uneven branches and leaves. On one side was a young demon. This demon looked ferocious. It could be said that he was the ugliest one among the 10 demons who entered the space before. But he was also the tallest one. He was more than 3 meters tall, with a pair of huge black wings on his back. He had a green face and fangs, holding a heavy sword that shone with green flames. Needless to say, this must be an important figure among the demons. This time, he also came on behalf of the demons. But his opponent was not a human powerhouse from the Temple League, but a strange demon beast. This demon beast was also tall and strong. It was actually a gorilla with glossy black fur. Its body was a bit stronger than that of the demon. Its whole body emitted a thick yellow light, and each attack was particularly heavy. The spiritual power fluctuation that Long Haochen felt before was mainly its earth attribute. At this time, it was going all out, and unexpectedly, it was hard to distinguish between the 2. It seemed that the strength of the 2 sides was about the same, and their speed was not very fast. But the fight was unusually fierce, almost completely a head-on collision. The gorilla's weapon was its pair of arms, and each time it collided with the young demon, the sound of metal clashing would be heard. But that was, after all, its body and not a real weapon. Relying on the green flame heavy sword, the young demon still had a certain upper hand, and each attack would leave a mark on the gorilla's arm. Long Haochen looked around them again, and suddenly understood the reason for their fight. Not far away, a soft white light floated in the air. This light was about the size of a human head, as if it was hanging on a piece of paper. Vaguely, it could be seen that there was a small cauldron in the white light, and the dense white light was emitted from it. It was a spiritual stove, and a very rare spiritual stove without any attribute. What was a spiritual stove without any attribute? For example, Long Haochen's Saint spiritual stove. This kind of spiritual stove without any attribute was the most gentle of all spiritual stoves. In other words, any strong person with any attribute could absorb it. Obviously, the demons were attracted to this spiritual stove after seeing it. And this gorilla was the spiritual stove's guardian that Ling Xiao had mentioned. Every spiritual stove would have a guardian, and only by killing the guardian or obtaining the guardian's permission could the spiritual stove be taken away. Obviously, this young demon's luck was not bad. He encountered a spiritual stove that he could use. Of course, it could also be said that his luck was very bad, because he met Long Haochen here. Instead of directly attacking, Long Houchen quietly retreated, and returned to the place where he had separated from his companions. After giving a few simple words, he climbed back up the big tree. There was no need to say anything. He and Yiting's mind were connected, and a light chant was constantly emitted from Yiting's mouth. A soft golden light rippled and fell on Long Houchen's body. This was a great recovery spell that Long Houchen did not know. A single target healing spell. But he did not need to know it. As long as Yiting knew it, he could use it. Giving Yiting a thumbs up, Long Houchen's figure flashed, and he finally jumped down from the tree. Suddenly, there was one more person. Whether it was the sturdy gorilla or the young demon, their attacks all paused. At this moment, a golden light flashed and fell on the gorilla's body. It was the great recovery spell that Long Houchen had Yiting prepare for him. Many times, actions were far more important than words. Long Houchen did not know if the gorilla could understand his words, but he could use his actions to show his identity as an enemy. A great recovery spell fell on the gorilla's body, and immediately the dozens of wounds on his arms quickly healed. The warm and pure light elements made the gorilla's fierce eyes look at Long Houchen suddenly become a lot gentler. At the same time, Long Houchen had already rushed towards the young demon. He gave his back to the gorilla. His body language showed his trust in the gorilla. He also believed that a magical beast that could guard the spiritual stove for fantasy paradise must be quite intelligent. At least it should understand that he was helping it. The young demon growled, but did not say anything. The green flame heavy sword in his hand shone with a green light, and went straight for Long Houchen. The hot air caused distorted ripples in the air. Long Houchen did not retreat even half a step. He raised his two swords and used divine defense to block. There was a crisp clang and golden light flashed. Long Houchen actually took half a step back. But he also felt the opponent's strength through this attack. Peak rank 6. This sword's foundation was close to 10,000 points of spiritual energy. But this was nothing for Long Houchen. The gap in spiritual energy could be made up for with skills and other strength. The golden light of light's vengeance shone, and Long Houchen quickly took a step forward with his left foot. He suddenly exerted force in his calf, and rushed towards the young demon like an arrow. Blue rain and hibiscus of light in his right hand had already turned into thousands of golden light spots that covered the opponent. It was Demon Extermination Flash. The young demon did not retreat half a step. Facing Long Houchen's attack, he swung the green flame heavy sword in his hand in front of him, and a large green light screen suddenly rippled. Long Houchen's demon-killing flash pierced the green light screen, creating a layer of water-like ripples. Unexpectedly, it was all blocked. This is a Radiance-grade equipment? That green flame heavy sword is at least a Radiance-grade equipment. The young demon's actual combat experience was obviously very rich. While blocking Long Houchen's attack, the pair of wings on his back suddenly spread open, and a sharp aura instantly erupted from his body. Then, from his body, a light shadow that was exactly the same as his body appeared, and it went straight for Long Houchen. This light shadow's body was shining with a strong green flame. The moment it was activated, the temperature within a radius of 100 meters rose sharply. Large areas of the surrounding plants were charred. Long Houchen snorted coldly. His forward momentum did not change, but he put away blue rain and hibiscus of light. He held light's retribution with both hands and made a heavy slashing motion. The dazzling golden light was completely contained in light's retribution. The golden light flashed, and the green light shadow was instantly split into two, passing by both sides of his body. Then, Long Houchen's body suddenly blazed with golden light, and the golden wings on his back suddenly stretched out and flapped with force. Because his speed was too fast, his entire body seemed somewhat illusory in the air. When Long Houchen broke his shadow split strike, the young demon finally seemed to panic a little. However, he was not that easy to deal with. With a furious roar, the green flame heavy sword also moved forward and went straight for Long Houchen's light's retribution. However, he did not intend to block Light's retribution with this stab. Instead, it was a move to perish together with the enemy. The green flame heavy sword was close to 6 feet long, while Long Houchen's Light's retribution was less than 4 feet long. With the same stab, it was obvious that Long Houchen was going to be hit first. The young demon's mind was very clear. In a situation where he was suddenly at a disadvantage, he made an extremely correct choice. In fact, he had no choice but to do so, because the sharpness of Long Houchen's Shura slash made him feel a great sense of crisis. Moreover, Long Houchen's stab and slash were connected too quickly, so he could not react at all. If Long Houchen dodged, then his attack would definitely be weakened. However, if he did not dodge, then the green flame heavy sword would definitely penetrate his body first. Given the young demon's cultivation base, and the radiant holy sword, it was not something that his radiant holy armor could block. However, the determination in Long Houchen's eyes to kill the enemy did not weaken at all. In the process of charging forward, the tip of his left foot suddenly rubbed against the ground gently, and his entire body suddenly tilted slightly in the air. It was as if he had lost his center of gravity, and his body that was originally charging forward became sideways. Just this simple change allowed him to dodge the stab of the green flame heavy sword. And this seemingly simple movement was completed at the most crucial moment. The green flame heavy sword even brushed past the radiant holy armor, letting out a series of ear-piercing sounds as it rubbed against the armor. Puff! Because of the deflection of his body, Long Houchen's sword that was originally aimed at the opponent's chest naturally changed a little. It pierced through the position where the young demon's left chest and left shoulder connected. The dense light elements turned into extremely sharp energy that instantly drilled into the opponent's body. Roar! The young demon roared violently. Immediately after, there was a loud explosion on his left shoulder, and a bloody hole the size of a human head was blasted open. However, he also took this opportunity to stagger back, and with a forceful flap of his wings, he flew away while sticking close to the ground. The explosion on his shoulder was not caused by Long Houchen. Instead, it was caused by the fire and darkness spiritual energy in his body. The reason was very simple. After Long Houchen's Shura thorn pierced into his body, the sharp spiritual energy brought about by the Shura thorn could not be resisted by his meridians. Although it pierced the center of his shoulder and chest, if the sharp spiritual energy was allowed to wreak havoc, even if he wanted to escape, he would not be able to. Therefore, this young demon was very ruthless to himself. At the crucial moment, he actually detonated his own spiritual energy and violently exploded at the location of the wound, causing the sharp spiritual energy of the Shura thorn to explode and force it out of his enlarged wound. Although this caused him to lose too much blood and was seriously injured, he still had the ability to adapt in the short term. At the very least, he had to escape from here first. No matter how good the spiritual stove was, he needed to be alive to enjoy it. No matter how good the spiritual stove was, he needed to be alive to enjoy it. Long Houchen did not chase. It was not that he did not want to, but that he could not. One slash and one stab. It looked very simple, but it was the strongest attack he could achieve at the moment. The Shura chop and Shura thorn had consumed half of his spiritual energy. No matter how talented he was in this kind of situation, he needed to have some buffer time. He needed to slightly adjust the spiritual energy in his body. Yiting's pure light elemental spiritual energy was quickly transferred into his body through Brilliant World. One could see this beautiful fairy floating there with her hands in a heart-shaped position. A bright golden light shone on Long Houchen's back. The reason why he made such a choice at the first sight was because of Long Houchen's careful judgment. The young demon's strength was very strong. He was at the peak of the 6th step. If it was a normal battle, it would not be easy for Long Houchen to win, because the other party was not as simple as a peak of the 6th step. The fact that he could represent the demons and come here showed his status among the demons. He could not be treated as an ordinary demon. Once he confronted the other party, Long Houchen did not have the confidence to win. But using the Shura Chop and Shura Thorn consecutively was different. Long Houchen appeared suddenly and launched his strongest attack without any pause. The other party's reaction was always half a beat slower. Sure enough, the attack succeeded and directly injured the opponent. At this time, the young demon was very depressed. He did not even know what happened and was injured by Long Houchen. His Shadow Split Strike was a very powerful attack skill. It could be said to be a combination of attack and defense, but it was directly broken by the Shura Chop. The Shura Thorn after that made it impossible for him to dodge. Coupled with Long Houchen's quick reaction, he was seriously injured. His heart was already at its limit, but his heart was still very calm. After being seriously injured, the first thing to do was to escape. This hatred could only be avenged if he was alive. In a moment, the young demon was about to hide in the forest. At this time, he felt a gust of evil wind blowing on his face. A huge ball of light shining with a strong golden light suddenly arrived. The attack was very sudden and abnormally powerful. At the moment of life and death, the young demon burst out with all his potential. The wings on his back suddenly spread to the extreme, using the air resistance to slightly reduce his forward momentum. At the same time, his right foot tapped on the ball of light and borrowed the force to jump sideways. With a muffled bang, the ball of light fell to the ground. However, the young demon's body also trembled violently. His entire right leg instantly lost feeling. Was the crushing of the vigorous light pill and the ripple of light so easy to resist? Not to mention that he was seriously injured. A ball of strong silver light almost collided with his body. This time, he no longer had any possibility of dodging. Gritting his teeth, he brazenly slashed with the green flame heavy sword in his hand. At the same time, he spat out a mouthful of black blood on the heavy sword. The green flame on the heavy sword suddenly blazed and forcibly cut through the silver light. However, his body had already been forced to the ground. I can't stop, or I will definitely die. This was the only thought in the young demon's mind. At the moment when he was about to land, his body turned around and his left foot struck the ground with all his strength, pushing his body to change direction again. With a twist of his body, the wings on his back flapped with all his strength. The spiritual power in his body crazily rushed to the wings. Because he used too much strength, the huge wound on his shoulder crazily spurted black blood. However, at this time, he couldn't care so much. Puff! In the air, the young demon spat out another mouthful of black blood. His body also changed. His eyes instantly turned blood-red, his whole body's muscles suddenly swelled, and the wound on his shoulder unexpectedly healed at an astonishing speed. Originally, he was a little exhausted, but now he was full of vigor and vitality again. His speed suddenly increased. Demon God Disintegration Art. Demon's Bloodline Skill. At this time, a huge flaming skeleton also brazenly arrived at this time. This attack, which had been accumulating power for a long time, contained an explosion of more than 4,000 spiritual power. It brazenly collided with the young demon's body. The ear-piercing roar shook the fantasy paradise. A scene that shocked the 21st general-level monster hunters happened. The young demon actually forcibly smashed the fire spell that Lin Xin had accumulated power to release. His body speed didn't decrease, but increased, and he flew in a direction like lightning. Demon God Disintegration Art could squeeze out all the potential of the user in an instant, and temporarily burst out a powerful force at the cost of burning one's own life force and soul. Under the situation of being seriously injured and facing so many strong enemies, the young demon didn't care about holding anything back. In order to survive, he would rather bear a strong backlash after using Demon God Disintegration Art. It should be known that it would take at least 3 years to recover his vitality after using this skill once. Among the demons, this demon god disintegration art could only be used by the 72 demon god pillars and their direct bloodline inheritors. The identity of this young demon was already obvious. A shining golden figure blocked the path that he must pass through without hesitation. Holy light infusion shield, divine defense block. At the same time, 2 loud and clear dragon roars also sounded behind the young demon. He had already raised the green flame heavy sword in his hand, but a special force forced him to turn around. However, his huge body crashed into Han Yu's light reflection shield. Bang! Han Yu, who had used divine defense block, was still sent flying. At this time, the blue and gold mini-dragon energy fiercely crashed into the young demon's body. The young demon screamed, and despair appeared in his eyes. At this moment, his spiritual power increased at an alarming rate and actually broke through the limit of 10,000 in the blink of an eye. It was obvious that his original cultivation was not as simple as the peak of the 6th rank, and he deliberately suppressed his spiritual power here. However, just as his spiritual power broke through 10,000 and was about to break free from the light rain double dragon draw, an extremely majestic aura suddenly appeared in the fantasy paradise. Immediately after, a huge figure suddenly fell from the sky and smashed into his body. Boom! The young demon's body was smashed into the ground. Immediately after, a storm of blows rained down on his body. The sound of bones breaking was accompanied by the bloody scene of blood splattering. The figure that suddenly smashed into the ground was the gorilla that had fought with the young demon earlier. At this moment it was undergoing an astonishing change. One could clearly see a large amount of yellow light pouring into its body from the floating light clouds in the air. Its originally extremely strong body grew at an alarming rate, and in the blink of an eye, it became a big fellow that was at least 10 meters tall. Meanwhile, the young demon beneath him had already lost all signs of life. Chapter 108. Long Houchen and his companions had already gathered together, so there was no need for them to make a move. Just now, when the young demon was about to escape, Long Houchen used the Saint's spiritual stove to divert his attack, so that he couldn't directly attack Han Yu. At the same time, he released the light rain twin dragon summons. When the young demon saw that he couldn't break free, he anxiously broke the seal that bound his body. His spiritual power sharply increased, causing the gorilla to suddenly erupt. The companions surrounded Long Houchen. Lin Xian gave Long Houchen a meaningful look, looked at him, and then looked at the milky white spiritual stove not far away. Long Houchen gently shook his head, indicating that his companions shouldn't act blindly without thinking. Killing the young demon was one thing, and getting the spiritual stove was another. At this time, the gorilla had already grown to a level that they couldn't contend with. Moving the spiritual stove at this time was obviously not a good idea. Han Yu said in a low voice, "From the looks of it, that demon must have suppressed its cultivation to enter this place." He tried to challenge the rules of the fantasy paradise, which caused this change. This gorilla's strength has already broken through to the 8th rank. Long Houchen said, "The demon god disintegration art. That young demon is probably the 4th demon god, demon monarch Samakina, one of the successors to the demon god position. I didn't expect that we would pick up a big bargain this time." Lin Xian said with a face full of regret. "Unfortunately, the final kill wasn't us. If I remember correctly, killing a demon god inheritor is a reward of at least 100,000 merit points." Wang Yuan said, "Be content. If we can get a spiritual stove, just one, it will be more than 100,000 merit points. Commander, this gorilla isn't easy to deal with. Should we retreat?" Long Houchen shook his head and said, "No need, let's wait and see. As long as we don't make any strange movements, it shouldn't hurt us." His perception was very sharp, not to mention that he had been enhanced by Yiting in the dream space. When he was attacking the young demon, he had actually been feeling the changes of the gorilla behind him. After being healed by greater recovery, The gorilla was very peaceful and not hostile towards him. The gorilla hammered for a few minutes before slowly stopping. When he left his previous position, the young demon's body was already unrecognizable. The gorilla stirred the pile of minced meat with his thick palm, as if he had found something. Then, he turned around and walked towards Long Houchin and the others. It had to be said that its current body was simply too huge. In front of this gorilla, Long Houchin and the rest looked like tiny dot. It was at least equivalent to a Type 8 powerhouse, and it might even be at the peak of the Type 8 realm. After the young abyssal broke the rules, the gorilla actually became so powerful. In the face of such a magical beast, it was impossible not to be nervous. But Long Houchin didn't retreat. Instead, he walked towards the gorilla. The light elemental fairy Yiting spread her 4 wings and lightly landed on Long Houchin's shoulder. It had to be said that in the dream paradise she was like a fish in water. In such a short period of time, Long Houchin's previously consumed spiritual power had been completely restored. How amazing was this speed! The gorilla slowly bent down, its 2 thick and powerful forelimbs supporting itself on the ground, and the ferocious light in its eyes gradually faded away. At this moment, Yiting suddenly flew out from Long Houchin's shoulder and floated to the gorilla's nose. A funny scene appeared. The gorilla actually looked at her with its eyes. The 2 huge pupils suddenly converged in the middle, looking a little comical. Yiting's mouth issued a series of crisp sounds. It was the elven language. The gorilla obviously felt a little uncomfortable because of the eye contact. It gently shook its head, and Yiting also flew up. At this moment, the gorilla's huge body began to shrink, and a faint yellow mist was emitted from its body. In just a moment, it returned to its original size, and the pressure on Long Houchin and the others also decreased. It slowly arrived in front of Long Houchin, and with a flick of its finger, a greenish-black object flew towards Long Houchin. Long Houchin subconsciously raised his hand to catch it, and was surprised to find that it turned out to be a fist-sized magical crystal. This magical crystal looked very strange. It was actually in the shape of a crown. Its whole body was black, but it emitted a cyan flame. Obviously, this was what the gorilla had just found in the young abyssal's body. This is... Long Houchin looked at the magical crystal in his hand in surprise. Lin Xian quickly walked to his side. He had a much better understanding of these strange things than Long Houchin. The crown of inheritance. That guy must be the heir of the demon monarch Samakina, and it is very likely that he is one of the top heirs. Only after the death of a demon god, a special magical crystal like the crown of inheritance will appear, and the heir of the demon god may also appear. The purer the bloodline, the higher the rank of the heir, and the higher the possibility of having the crown of inheritance. We have really picked up a treasure this time. This thing alone is worth more than 100,000 merit points. It is said that if the crown of inheritance of the demons is embedded in a weapon, it can increase the power of the weapon by a level. Unfortunately, boss, you can't use it. The crown of inheritance of the demons can only be used by people who do not have the light attribute. Otherwise, the conflict between light and darkness will have a negative effect. Long Houchin thought for a moment and said, "This thing belongs to you, use it on your fire crystal staff. When we go back, we will find someone to embed it." Lin Xian was stunned. "Boss, this is not good. Let's go back and exchange it for merit points." Long Houchin laughed. "Why don't you know how to calculate? You are our team's god of wealth. What do we need merit points for? Isn't it to increase our own strength? Since this thing is a rare treasure, it can directly increase our strength. Why do we need to exchange it for merit points? In our team, good things should be given to those who are suitable to use it. This is the basic principle." After saying this, he turned to the gorilla and bowed slightly. "Thank you, friend of the forest." The gorilla let out a low roar towards Long Houchin. Suddenly, it raised a hand and extended its thick finger in front of Long Houchin. Long Houchin was stunned, not knowing what it was going to do. Yiting flew over and pulled Long Houchen's palm with her small hands, placing it on the gorilla's finger. Suddenly, a strange wave of spiritual power flowed from the gorilla's thick finger into Long Houchen's body. A layer of golden light rippled over Long Houchen's body, while a layer of yellow light rippled over the gorilla's body. After a moment, the gorilla's eyes gradually revealed some surprise. It slowly raised its palm, took 2 steps back, and suddenly stood up. It beat its chest a few times with its fists, and let out a deep roar. It reluctantly looked at the milky white spiritual stove hanging on a nearby tree branch, opened its mouth, and spat out a yellow light that shone on the stove. The stove floated down and flew in the direction of Long Houchen until it stopped in front of him. The gorilla suddenly turned around and ran into the distance. Low growls filled with reluctance came from its throat one after another. "It gave the spiritual stove to us?" Sima Xian said in shock. Long Houchen nodded silently. "That should be the case. Grandpa Ling said that there are 2 first tests to obtain the spiritual stove in Fantasy Paradise. One is the situation right now, where the guardian magical beast willingly lets us take the spiritual stove. The other is to rely on killing. Although we can obtain the spiritual stove through these 2 methods, if we obtain it peacefully like this, we will receive the favor of the fantasy realm, and the test when we leave will be relatively easier. But if we obtain the spiritual stove through killing, the test will be much harsher. It's the same for the last test." Sima Xian nodded and said, "Boss, then hurry up and fuse with it. Let's go and see if there are any others." The others naturally expressed their agreement. Long Houchen was the core and leader of the team. This spiritual stove had no attribute, so he could directly use it. Naturally, it would increase his strength first. Long Houchen shook his head and said, "I just said that suitable treasures should be given to suitable people. That's right, I can use this spiritual stove. But I'm not the most suitable person for it. Inger, come and absorb it." "Me?" Chen Inger pointed at her own nose and looked at Long Houchen with a puzzled expression. She had never thought that Long Houchen would give the first spiritual stove that everyone obtained to her. Not only was Chen Inger not happy, she said with some dissatisfaction, "Captain, do you think I'm the most useless in our team, so you want to increase my strength first?" Long Houchen laughed and said, "What nonsense are you saying? Hurry up and absorb it. This is an order. You're weak? Madul has evolved. I saw it that day." This little guy silently completed the process of evolving from a magical beast of the 6th rank to the 7th rank. As long as he has a suitable magical crystal, he can already display the strength of a magical beast of the 8th rank. You're weak? This spiritual stove is the most suitable for you. Hurry up and absorb it. As you absorb it, I'll explain to everyone why it's the most suitable for you. Only then did Chen Inger become happy. She excitedly ran to Long Houchen's side and took out her crystal ball. Specks of white light appeared from her hands and poured into the crystal ball. Immediately, the crystal ball shone brightly. A strange and gentle spiritual force began to appear around Chen Inger's body. The crystal ball flashed and emitted white light, enveloping the spiritual stove and pulling it in front of Chen Inger. Chen Inger's beautiful face immediately became serious. She bit her right index finger and dripped a drop of blood onto the spiritual stove. Immediately, a thick white light suddenly burst out and enveloped Chen Inger's body. This white light wasn't strong, but it was very thick and sticky. It was like a large cocoon, enveloping Chen Inger. Sima Xian asked doubtfully, "Boss, what kind of spiritual stove is this? Tell us." Everyone knew about spiritual stoves, but not everyone knew about all spiritual stoves. Generally speaking, every class would at most understand the types of spiritual stoves that their class could absorb. But Long Houchen was different. When he was young and trained with his father, Long Houchen especially explained a lot about spiritual stoves to him. It could be said that Long Houchen knew all of the spiritual stoves that were known. Long Xingwu even specially drew a lot of colorful pictures for him to identify. The reason why Long Haochen learned so much about spiritual stoves was because Long Xingwu had a long-term vision. In his opinion, his son's future wasn't as simple as just obtaining a few spiritual stoves. Instead, he had to fuse spiritual stoves. A truly powerful spiritual stove would never only have one type. It had to be fused. Even though it was very difficult to fuse spiritual stoves, once it was successful, one could create a brand new spiritual stove that belonged solely to oneself. Its power was even more unpredictable. For example, among the known spiritual stoves, the strongest was naturally Kai-Er's spiritual stove of samsara. But this was referring to a single spiritual stove. If someone had a fused spiritual stove, then its power might even be above that of the spiritual stove of samsara. Of course, this was just an example. Even if it was a fused spiritual stove, none of the known spiritual stoves could surpass the offensive power of the spiritual stove of samsara. Otherwise, the legend of the son of samsara wouldn't have been so resounding. But from this, it could be seen that a fused spiritual stove was much more powerful than a normal one. When fusing spiritual stoves, one couldn't just fuse the spiritual stoves that one's profession could absorb. In the tens of thousands of years of continuous experimentation, there were some experiences of fusing spiritual stoves. The key was to match the spiritual stove owner's power. There was also an element of luck. No one dared to say that they would succeed in fusing spiritual stove. But no matter who it was, as long as they had 2 or more spiritual stoves, they would have the opportunity to fuse. Long Xingwu taught his son all the knowledge of spiritual stoves in preparation for him to fuse spiritual stoves when he became stronger in the future. Long Haochen said, "This spiritual stove is called the substitute spiritual stove. Its ranking is a bit higher than my saint's spiritual stove, but there is still a limit. Any profession can absorb it. After the substitute spiritual stove is released, it can completely block an attack for the owner after receiving an attack. The upper limit is 3 times the owner's spiritual power. The substitute spiritual stove can evolve twice at most. After evolution, it can withstand 4 or 5 times the attack power. As a summoner, Er's defensive power is the weakest among us. She also doesn't know any defensive magic. Right now, she doesn't have a sufficiently powerful summoning magic. Therefore, I believe that this spiritual stove is the most suitable for her. It can greatly increase her survivability on the battlefield. Moreover, the substitute spiritual stove's nature is relatively gentle. When we leave this place, its test shouldn't be too difficult. More importantly, the stand-in spirit stove had another use. If it wasn't used as an upgrade, it could replicate the skill that the user had just used. But after using it once, it will lose its effect for a day. Er's summoning of the living spirit gate is random. With the substitute spiritual stove, she can summon twice the number of times she can summon with the same amount of spiritual power. The possibility of summoning a powerful magic beast will increase by a lot. In the future, when she can truly control the living spirit gate, we can have 2 living spirit gates on the battlefield. Han Yu said, "But if this spiritual stove is given to you, the effect will be just as good. Whether it's the substitute or the duplicate skill, it can both increase your fighting power. Moreover, these 2 abilities can play an important role." Long Haochen laughed and said, "That's right, I can also use it. But I haven't finished speaking. This substitute spiritual stove's effect isn't small, but why is it ranked so low? The reason is very simple. It takes too long to activate the spiritual stove. Activating the substitute ability requires at least 10 seconds. When activating the duplicate skill, the time to use the skill increases by 50%. If I fuse with it, it will be relatively useless. And Er's position in our team is the one that doesn't need to worry about the spiritual stove's usage time. So, I finally decided to let her absorb it." After listening to Long Haochen's explanation, everyone felt a sense of admiration. That's right, this spiritual stove was the most suitable for Chen Ying. Sima Xian laughed and said, "Boss, when you come across the most violent spiritual stove, you must leave it for me. I like violent ones the most." Long Haochen laughed and said, "That will depend on our luck. I believe that most of the spiritual stoves have already been found by the people who came in this time. Being able to obtain this spiritual stove is already a worthwhile trip. If we obtain more, it will be an additional benefit." Long Haochen's mentality was very good. He already had 2 spiritual stoves. This time, when he led his teammates into Dream Paradise, he actually wanted to strengthen his teammate. Even if the substitute spiritual stove didn't have that long of a usage time, he would give it to his teammates first. It was just that he wouldn't say it out loud. The white light that enveloped Chen Ying'er gradually dimmed. When she reappeared in everyone's line of sight, her face was a bit stunned. "The fusion was successful?" Wang Yuanyuan asked with concern. Chen Ying'er shook her head, then nodded and said, "It seems like the fusion was successful. But why can't I feel the effects of this spiritual stove?" Long Haochen smiled and said, "Don't worry, this is just the initial fusion. How can it be so fast? You still have to go through the second and third test before the spiritual stove really belongs to you. At least you can't really use it during the time we are in Dream Paradise." Chen Ying'er stuck out her tongue and said, "It's quite troublesome." Lin Xian said unhappily, "How about I exchange with you? I'm not afraid of trouble." Chen Ying'er giggled and said, "Okay, then exchange. If you have the ability, let my spiritual stove come out and let you absorb it. I heard it just now. Substitute spiritual stove, it's really good. Thank you, Captain." Long Haochen laughed and said, "Don't thank me, it's something we all got together. Let's go, let's continue to search. Lin Xian, how's your spiritual power recovering?" That previous fire curse had almost exhausted all of Lin Xian's spiritual energy. Lin Xian said, "I've recovered part of it. It doesn't matter, I'm not the main fighting force anyway. Hee, Captain, let's go later." As he said that, he took out a broken leather bag from somewhere and excitedly ran to the pile of minced meat on the young demon's body and started to pick and choose what he wanted. He didn't even think it was dirty. Chen Ying'er suddenly pouted and said, "Brother Yu Yao, why are you so disgusting?" Lin Xian didn't turn his head and said, "What's so disgusting? The main ingredients of the medicine you took are the bodies of magical beasts and demons, but I don't see you not eating it. I reckon that this fellow is at least at the 7th order, and may even have reached the 8th order. We had to spend so much effort to kill him after suppressing our strength here. Although his body is broken, it's still good stuff. Plus, there's a weapon. We should take it too. His sword is pure fire element. Boss, I'll buy it myself and give it to Xian or later. Green flame, glory level, this is good stuff." Chen Ying'er curled her lips and said, "Looks like I'll have to call you Brother Yu Yao who picks up trash in the future." Lin Xian's picking delayed the group for a while before they set off again. According to Long Haochen's memory, it shouldn't be too far from here. There should be another spiritual stove. After experiencing what happened just now, Long Haochen was more cautious. The strength of the young demon who was killed was far beyond his expectations. More importantly, when the demons entered Fantasy Paradise, that guy was at the back. The demons' class division was very clear, and they were in a certain position. The black-haired youth who gave him a gloomy and ethereal aura was at the front, so he must have the highest status. Even Yu Yi and Ling Xiao were ranked 3rd and 4th, not even 2nd. Yu Yi was the Moon Demon's most beloved daughter. As for that Ling Xiao, if Long Haochen guessed correctly, he was probably related to the Demon Emperor, or at least a member of the heaven-defying Demon Dragon clan. The only thing Long Haochen didn't understand was Ling Xiao's strength. Since she was a member of the heaven-defying Demon Dragon clan, why was she not even rank 6 before? But now, she had obviously broken through to rank 6. It could be said that although the 10 people from the Temple League who entered here were members of the Monster Hunters, and each of them was strong, the demons seemed to have put in a lot of effort, and they were the top elites of the most powerful races. If they really met one-on-one, the demon hunters of the Alliance would probably be in trouble. This also made Long Houchen a little more worried about Kai. The moving scenery of Fantasy Paradise was easy to relax, but Long Houchen always maintained the strongest vigilance. Yiting sat on his shoulder and linked her perception with Long Houchen's. In this way, Long Houchen's extraordinary mental strength could be unleashed to the greatest extent. In this fantasy paradise, skills like the Eye of Truth and the Eye of Detection were all ineffective. Everything could only be found through exploration on the ground. After walking for about an hour, they found a badly mangled corpse of a magical beast. The magic crystal had been dug out, and there was no sign of the spiritual stove. According to their previous encounter, one of the spiritual stoves had obviously been taken away, and it was done in a violent way. Long Houchen stopped, thought for a moment, and said in a deep voice, "Sima, make a hole in the ground. Let's bury this demon beast and let it return to the embrace of nature." Okay. At this time, the trust of the team was shown, and no one questioned Long Houchen's decision. The ball of light blasted it, making a deep hole in the ground. Long Houchen was not afraid of getting dirty, and dragged the demon beast over, and then buried it with his companions. During the whole process, Yiting did not make any sound, and just silently watched Long Houchen's movements. Until the burial was complete, there was a subtle fluctuation of emotion in her eyes, as if she was praising him. "Let's go." After burying the body, Long Houchen continued to move forward with his companions. The reason why he did this was not entirely because of his own kindness, but also because of his understanding of this fantasy paradise. This was the world left by the goddess of nature, so everything should be done according to the idea of being in harmony with nature. Killing could certainly get the spiritual stove, but who knew the difficulty of the test? Even if they passed in the end, the price paid would not be small. Since there was a way to reduce trouble, why not use it? When the gorilla left the spiritual stove to him and turned to leave, Long Houchen had already decided that the direction of their action this time was to be the guardian of everything in the fantasy paradise. This would not only make him feel comfortable and in line with his character, but at the same time, it was very likely to obtain greater benefits. Long Houchen's idea was soon verified. They were not far from the place where the demon beast's body was buried, and he was surprised to find that his perception had become stronger. The range of perception had increased by at least a third. In this illusory paradise, this was an incredible boost. Sure enough, Long Houchen suddenly understood in his heart and whispered a few words to his companions. Everyone nodded, expressing their absolute support for all his decisions. For Long Houchen, there were two urgent matters at the moment. One was to find Kai and then continue to act here according to his ideas until the end of time. No matter how strong an individual was, what could he do in front of nature? Unless he reached the abnormal strength of the Demon Emperor, it was possible that it would be different. The increase in perception made Long Houchen's heart calm. As he continued to move forward, he soon felt it again. This time he felt a strong collision of spiritual power, and the feeling was clearer and more intense than when he encountered the young devil. After a little thought, Long Houchen stopped and said to his companions, "There seems to be a scuffle not far ahead. Don't go there, wait for my news and hide." After saying this, he once again pulled out his two swords and quickly sneaked forward. Since it was a scuffle, there must be both sides. In this case, he naturally could not easily expose the fact that he had brought people into fantasy paradise. This was not only to hide from the enemy, but also from the demon hunters on the Alliance's side. Otherwise, there would be some trouble when he went out. The closer he got, the more obvious his perception was. The scuffle was very fierce, and it was difficult not to notice the strong spiritual power fluctuations. Soon, Long Houchen approached the battlefield. When he saw the battle in the field from a distance, he could not help but feel relieved. Because, among the two sides of the scuffle, he saw Kai at a glance. There were as many as 7 people in the scuffle, and Long Houchen knew 4 of them. On the side of the Temple League, there were 4 strong people. In addition to Kerr, Long Houchen also knew Zhang Fangfang, and the other 2 were a mage and a warrior. On the opposite side, there were 3 demons, Yu Yi, Lung Xiao, and an arrogant young man with an orange glow all over his body. 4 against 3, but the 2 sides were locked in battle. Their strength was equal. In addition to these 7 people, there were 3 corpses on the ground, all of which belonged to magical beasts. Not far away there were 3 spiritual stoves of different colors hanging there, emitting a faint light. It turned out to be 3 spiritual stoves, no wonder it caused a scuffle. While Long Houchen was secretly surprised, he could not help but feel a little excited. There was no need to summon his partners over. With his participation, his side would definitely be able to suppress the opponent. Moreover, he could even borrow Yu Ye's help at the crucial moment. As long as the 3 spiritual stoves fell into the hands of the demon hunters, it would be a good thing even if he and Kai could only get one. At the thought of this, Long Houchen adjusted his spiritual power and was about to dash out. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt an indescribable and intense crisis appearing behind him. Yiting let out a scream, and a layer of golden light spread from her body, enveloping herself and Long Houchen. The crisis came too quickly, so much so that Long Houchen could only feel the hairs on his body standing up. However, the more it was in such a situation, the more he could erupt with the strongest combat power. It was completely too late to dodge. At the moment when the opponent's attack was about to land on him, Long Houchen suddenly relaxed his body, and the spiritual power in his body instantly surged to his back. At the same time, his body trembled violently along with the spiritual power. Light rippled. This time, it wasn't just the light that rippled, but his body at the same time. In the seemingly subtle trembling, Long Houchen had already adjusted his state to the peak. Bang! The golden light barrier was the first to shatter, followed by the Holy Spirit protection from the brilliant holy armor. Then, a fist that was as heavy as a mountain bombarded Long Houchen's back. Long Houchen's entire body seemed to be unable to withstand the force, and he flew forward instantly like a kite with a broken string. In an instant, his body also emitted a bright golden light. However, at the same time when he was sent flying by the opponent's fist, he turned around in midair and saw who the enemy was that could touch his back without being discovered. A handsome face appeared in his line of sight. A dark and empty aura suddenly spread out like a large black net, pouncing towards him. Even in this place that was filled with the life aura of nature, when the gloomy and empty aura spread out, Long Houchen could still clearly feel the silence of all aura around his body. That's right, the enemy who ambushed him from behind was the leader of the 10 demons. At the same time that Long Houchen was sent flying by the punch, there was an instant scream on the other side of the battlefield. Long Houchen's perception was still enveloping the entire battlefield, and he immediately sensed an extremely powerful aura appearing on the other side of the battlefield. With the appearance of this powerful aura, the mage from the Temple League had clearly died from a sneak attack as well. The black-haired young man sent Long Houchen flying with a punch, but was surprised to find that he didn't seem to have suffered any injuries. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of doubt on his face. How could he know that Long Houchen not only had a strong defense, but also relied on the ripple of light to resolve most of the impact and offset the impact of the dark attribute? At the same time, there was also the existence of the life-sharing soul chain. With this, although he was injured, it wasn't serious. Do the demons only know how to sneak attack? Long Houchen landed on the ground, and the spiritual wings on his back spread out. A glaring light was released, and he didn't need to do anything at all. A large amount of golden fog in the fantasy paradise forest had already swarmed towards his body. This was the advantage of being in this place. Long Houchen relied on his physique as the scion of the holy light and his previous performance in the fantasy paradise to obtain great support from the environment here. Moreover, he also had the assistance of Yiting. On the contrary, although the black-haired young man, whom Huang Shuo called a Bao, was strong, he obviously couldn't obtain any help from the fantasy paradise. He would only be repelled by the surrounding environment. In this world, there are only results of success and failure. The process isn't important, a Bao said calmly, and his emotions didn't fluctuate because of Long Haochen's words. At this time, although Long Haochen was very worried about the situation on Kai Er's side, he didn't dare to have any doppelgangers. The black-haired young man, a Bao, gave him an extremely great pressure, which was far from what the young demon from before could compare to. It seemed that if he revealed even the slightest flaw, he would face a destructive attack from the powerful demons in front of him in the next moment. This is the difference between demons and humans. Because in your hearts there is no concept of morality, let alone a sense of shame. You are just completely wild beasts that only have survival instincts. In our eyes, there is no difference between you and demonic beasts. You are just slightly stronger than ordinary demonic beasts, Long Haochen said coldly. The black-haired young man's black eyes finally showed a momentary fluctuation of emotions, but it quickly returned to normal. A faint smile appeared on his face. Are you trying to anger me? You are still too inexperienced. Although I don't seem to be much older than you, in reality, I have existed in this world for more than 30 years. How can my will be affected by a few words from you? Submit or die, you can choose one. You are a rare human who can make me want to subdue you. I can give you this chance. Long Haochen also laughed. Are you waiting for your companions to kill my people and then surround me? But that doesn't seem easy. The enemy's sneak attack was indeed sudden, but the situation in front of him didn't seem too bad to Long Haochen. First of all, the sudden appearance of life sharing would definitely attract the attention of his companions. With their intelligence, it was not difficult for them to judge that he was in trouble and would definitely rush over as soon as possible. On the other hand, Kai Er and the others were definitely at a disadvantage, but don't forget that there was still Yu Yi, the spy, on the enemy's side. Yu Yi had a restriction placed on her by Kai Er. In a life-and-death situation, she would naturally make a choice. Therefore, Long Haochen was not very anxious now. A Bao laughed and said, "Young man, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think you need the rest of us to do it?" Long Haochen said, "Think highly of myself? Not necessarily. I have just killed one of your people. He gave me an inheritance crown magic crystal." Chapter 109. Hearing the words inheritance crown, the black-clothed youth's expression finally changed. With a gloomy expression, he asked, "Who did you kill?" Long Haochen saw the change of expression on his face, and said with a smile that was neither too fast nor too slow, "It's the biggest one among you. If I'm not wrong, he should be one of the successors of the demon monarch Samakina. What about you? To be able to be the leader this time, your status must be higher than that guy. Samanaga is already the 4th demon god, so your identity is also on the verge of being revealed. The successor of the demon god emperor, should I address you as such? However, your name is really immature, a Bao. You're very smart, but smart people always die very quickly." With a step forward, a layer of nothingness rippled around a Bao's body. His movements seemed incomparably slow, but Long Haochen only felt his vision distort slightly. In the next instant, a Bao was already in front of him. He still didn't use any weapons and just threw a simple punch. This time, Long Haochen was fully prepared. Facing a Bao's attack, his eyes suddenly became sharp. He took half a step back with his left foot and made a sitting position at the same time. He raised Light's retribution in his left hand, and the intense light of the glorious sun burst out almost instantly. Moreover, the skill was completely contained in the sword. At the same time, blue rain and hibiscus of light in his right hand erupted with dazzling brilliance. The demon destruction flash instantly erupted. Facing Long Haochen's counterattack, a Bao didn't seem to notice it at all. He didn't even have the intention to block it. His fist only changed direction slightly and still blasted towards Long Houchen. Dang, the first sound was the sound of Light's retribution slashing the black-clothed youth's arm. What shocked Long Houchen was that his Light's retribution was directly bounced off. Following that, Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light's demon extermination flash pierced Abao's body, creating a series of explosions. However, it still couldn't stop him from moving forward. When the demon-killing flash struck his body, Abao only frowned slightly. He didn't suffer any damage. Seeing that the fist was about to hit him, Long Houchen lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his right foot. His entire upper body twisted and he dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. At the same time, his Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light shone brightly. Holy swords! From the start of the battle, Yiting had been chanting incantations behind Long Houchen's back. At this moment, Long Houchen's sword pierced out, transforming into the might of a holy sword. However, Abao still didn't dodge and allowed Long Houchen's holy sword to pierce his ribs. This time, the rebound force was even more terrifying. In that instant, Long Houchen clearly saw that his Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light had actually bent a little due to the immense pressure. Then, the violent rebound force made his right arm sore and numb. His left foot stepped on Abao's waist, and Long Houchen borrowed the momentum to bounce back and land 10 meters away. His face was filled with shock. He didn't see any defensive equipment on Abao's body, only a simple black robe. However, his attack with Ripple of Light didn't have any effect on him. This was the first time Long Houchen had faced such a battle. No matter how strong one's skills were, when one's attack couldn't cause any damage to the opponent, then everything would be in vain. Abao said coldly, "You think you can kill Shen Shang with this little strength? Even if your spiritual power is suppressed, you are far from being his opponent. Your attack is only slightly stronger than that trash knight who died in my hands. However, it's still not enough." Long Houchen took a deep breath. He knew that Abao was stronger than he had guessed. However, even demons with tens of thousands of spiritual power wouldn't dare to let his holy sword with Ripple of Light directly pierce their bodies. How could Shen Shang use his body to resist his attack? External spiritual power. These 3 words appeared in Long Houchen's mind almost instantly. He immediately understood why Abao's defense was so terrifying. That's right, the upper limit of spiritual power in Dream Paradise was 10,000. However, this restriction was mainly on internal spiritual power. Although external spiritual power was also a kind of spiritual power, it was more manifested in the strength of the body. As long as Abao didn't use external spiritual power to attack and only defended, even if his external spiritual power was strong, he wouldn't be rejected by the rules of Dream Paradise. However, how strong was his external spiritual power? It had to be at least above 10,000. Otherwise, how could he block the rank 5 skill of a glory-grade equipment? Looking at the bewildered look in Long Houchen's eyes, Abao smiled coldly and said, "No need to guess. My external spiritual power is more than 20,000. Even if I don't use any internal spiritual power, I am equivalent to a rank 8 powerhouse. You small fries want to stir up a storm in front of me? That's a fool's dream. If it wasn't for this annoying place restricting attacks, my first attack would have already made you die with the world." 20,000 external spiritual power. For Long Houchen, this could even be described as a fantasy. How could an external spiritual power reach 20,000? He had never imagined such a thing. His internal and external spiritual power didn't exceed 7,000. However, at this time, there was no way for him to retreat. The moment he retreated, Kai and his companions would have to face this powerful existence in front of them. Taking a deep breath, Long Houchen said indifferently, "Since you're so strong, why don't you just kill me? If this was the outside world, perhaps you would have the ability to do so. Unfortunately, this is Dream Paradise. Even if you want to kill me, I'm afraid you won't be able to." No matter how strong your internal and external spiritual power is, when you enter here, your internal spiritual power will definitely be limited to less than 10,000. As for your external spiritual power, do you dare to use it to attack me? Even if I can't defeat you, it won't be easy for you to defeat me. As he said that, Long Houchen put away Light's punishment. He didn't doubt that this self-proclaimed 30-year-old Bao in front of him had a cultivation of at least rank 8, or even rank 9. So what? This was dream paradise. In the next moment, Long Houchen moved. His body instantly rushed forward, exerting his speed to the extreme. The spiritual wings on his back retracted, and he stared at the opponent in front of him with a burning gaze. Bao snorted disdainfully. He didn't seem to be moved by Long Houchen's words, but this time, he didn't just throw a simple punch. In a flash, he had already arrived at Long Houchen's side. Strong dark energy instantly interweaved in the air into a large net, going straight to envelop Long Houchen. Long Houchen's eyes lit up. In an instant, blue rain and hibiscus of light were already raised high above his head, and his eyes were shining brightly. The strong golden color instantly turned into the sharpest slash, the Azura slash. An ear-piercing whistling sound instantly rang out. After continuous practice, Long Houchen's attack was no longer a simple Azura slash. Instead, it was an enhanced version of the Azura slash that was launched with the help of the Holy Sword and the rippling light. Although he didn't have time to accumulate power at this moment, even so, the power of his Azura slash could only be described as terrifying. The greatest characteristic of the Azura slash wasn't its total attack, but its sharpness. All the attack power was concentrated on the blade, and it had the ability to restrain all the surrounding energy. The sound of silk tearing exploded in the air. Although Long Houchen felt heavy resistance, the tyrannical power of the Azura slash still played a sufficient role. The large net interweaved by the dark spiritual energy was instantly split in half. At the same time, Long Houchen used the same trick again. A pair of golden wings flapped behind him, and his entire body's speed was raised to the extreme. Following the momentum of the Azura slash, Azura thrust was also launched in an instant. This combo seemed simple, but it was unknown how many times he had practiced it. The connection was extremely tight, especially after reaching the 6th stage. With the acceleration of the spiritual wings, the power of this attack was naturally increased to the extreme. So what if you have 20,000 external spiritual energy points? Can you block my Azura thrust that focuses all the attack power on a single point? Seeing the powerful explosion of the Azura slash, Bao was also slightly stunned. The opponent, who was originally very insignificant in his eyes and only had some petty tricks, seemed to have suddenly become difficult to deal with. However, he didn't care much. Facing Long Houchen's Azura thrust, a layer of purple light erupted in his eyes. His black pupils suddenly turned purple, and he used a method that Long Houchen couldn't imagine to face the Azura thrust. He merely lifted his right hand and pointed his index finger forward. In that instant, his index finger had already turned into a crystalline and translucent purple. Circles of purple light could be seen around his finger, and they could see that there were circles of light converging inwards. The power of this finger actually caused a series of fine cracks to appear in the air where the purple light rippled. Poof! The Azura thrust collided with Bao's index finger. Light and darkness, two diametrically opposed spiritual energies, suddenly erupted. Long Houchen only felt that his Azura thrust seemed to have pierced an insurmountable barrier, and the huge impact completely engulfed all his attack power. Terrifying dark energy suddenly wreaked havoc and swept towards his body. However, on the other side, Bao didn't have it easy either. He had obviously underestimated Long Houchen's attack. Azura thrust could be said to be Long Houchen's strongest single-target attack skill at the moment. In terms of attack power, it was even stronger than Light Rain's double dragon draw. How could such an attack be so easily blocked? What's more, Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light were incredible weapons, even if they hadn't evolved to the legendary level yet. Although they hadn't evolved to the legendary level, the combination of its sharpness and the Azura thrust still produced an extremely strong attack power. An ear-piercing explosion reverberated in the air. In the midst of a muffled groan, a bow instantly retreated. His right hand was actually fractured. The sharp spiritual energy brought by the Azura thrust caused his expression to change slightly. His whole body erupted with a layer of deep purple light, which forced the sharp spiritual energy out of his body. Just from the way he dealt with Long Houchen's killing blow, it could be seen that a Bao's strength was indeed far superior to that of the young demon, Shen Shang. Naturally, the most important factor was the external spiritual energy that he claimed was more than 20,000. This was also the first time that Long Houchen knew that external spiritual energy could actually be so terrifying when it reached a certain level. However, his attack didn't stop because of this. A mouthful of blood sprayed from Long Houchen's mouth, followed by a loud dragon roar. Although the Azura thrust was shaken back, the Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light in his hands instantly turned into two mini dragons of light and water, which directly collided with his opponent. Long Houchen's thinking was very simple. Facing such a powerful opponent, it was impossible to win by just relying on attrition. It was only a matter of time before his opponent killed him. His only chance was to erupt, a momentary burst of power. If he released all of his trump cards, he would at least be able to seriously injure his opponent. Inside this illusory paradise, Long Houchen's spiritual energy recovery speed was who knew how much faster than others. Even if it was a Bao in front of him, Long Houchen was confident that his spiritual energy recovery speed would be stronger than his opponent's. In this kind of situation, the last thing he was afraid of was a battle of attrition. If he could injure a Bao, then he might have a chance if he continued to exhaust his opponent. A Bao really didn't expect Long Houchen to have a follow-up move, and such a powerful one at that. Long Houchen spat out a mouthful of blood, not because he was injured by a Bao's attack, but because he had continuously used his strongest skills. His meridians couldn't bear it, so he spat out blood. But in this kind of situation, he still released the Light Rain Double Dragon summon. Amidst the violent roar, a Bao once again let out a muffled groan, his body explosively retreating. Moreover, the two small dragons, blue and gold, were also tightly entangled around his body. Long Houchen stood still, not giving himself the slightest chance to catch his breath. A golden mist of light instantly rose from his body. Ready! His total spiritual energy was around 6,000, and the 3 consecutive attacks just now consumed almost 5,000 spiritual energy. In other words, his remaining spiritual energy was originally not enough to release the second Azura thrust. But in this illusory paradise, with the help of the light elemental fairy, Yiting, Long Houchen had the ability to release the second Azura thrust. Light's punishment had already replaced Blue Rain and Hibiscus of Light's positions. Long Houchen couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood, because he had already raised his ready ability to the extreme. In the air, one could even see a golden mist of light swarming towards Long Houchen. It didn't recover his spiritual energy, but directly entered his body and turned into the accumulated power of the Azura thrust. This guy is crazy. This was the only thought in a Bao's mind at that moment. From the moment Long Houchen released the Azura slash, his attacks had never stopped, and almost every attack was released at the limit of his body's endurance. He didn't even give himself the slightest chance to catch his breath. It could be said that from the start of the Light Rain Double Dragon summon, he was overdrafting his strength. Moreover, he was directly injuring himself. Even the Soul Chain's life-sharing ability couldn't help him with this completely masochistic fighting style. Not only that, but a ball of red light had already appeared on Abao's body. It was the Punishment Knight's lock-on skill. The same red light had already appeared on Long Houchen's body. The sacrifice skill had been activated. He was going all out, but this was also the best time for him to go all out. Even with a Bao's strength, he couldn't help but be a little afraid of Long Houchen's desperate state. This kind of crazy attack without any regard for the consequences could seriously injure him. At this moment, a Bao no longer held back. An oppressive aura filled with an ancient aura bloomed from his body. The black spiritual energy that was originally released had completely turned dark purple, and even his eyes had turned completely dark purple. A pair of black dragon wings unfurled from his back, and his white skin was covered with fine dark purple dragon scales. He exerted force with his arms, brazenly breaking the bindings of the light rain double dragon summon. Under the influence of his aura, Long Houchen's Azura thrust was launched almost at the same time. The ear-piercing howl caused the surrounding air to distort violently. Under the effect of the sacrifice skill, Long Houchen's attack directly cut through the air. What was even more strange was that there was actually no spiritual energy fluctuations around his body. Everything gave off a strange feeling at this moment. The spiritual energy was completely condensed into a single point. A Bao's solemn expression became even more unsightly. With a flip of his right hand, a thin sword leaped into his palm. The tip of the sword pointed forward and directly met Long Houchen's Azura thrust. Ding! Amidst the ear-piercing explosion, a Bao let out another muffled groan. He finally spat out a mouthful of dark purple blood, and his whole body also emitted a purple light. Under Long Houchen's attack, he was directly sent flying more than 10 meters away. The thin sword in his hand shattered inch by inch, and actually collapsed just like that. However, after completing this attack, Long Houchen quietly landed on the ground, gasping for breath. After throwing a great recovery elixir into his mouth, his entire aura fell at an alarming rate. Raging flames of anger were already ignited in a Bao's eyes. "I'm injured. I've actually been injured twice by this human whose strength is far inferior to mine. Since he's a lunatic, then let him die as a lunatic." A Bao's body suddenly became strong, and his hands had completely turned into dragon claws. Streaks of dark purple lightning just hovered around his body. However, at this moment, an unparalleled cold murderous intent instantly appeared in the air. Everything in the surroundings also became dim, as if at this moment, the dreamy paradise had suddenly turned gray. A black figure quietly appeared beside Long Houchen, silently staring at a Bao who was not far away. She slowly raised her left hand, and behind her, a huge gray light gradually became solid. It was in the shape of a sword, and the crazy murderous intent instantly rose to the peak. "Perhaps I can't defeat you, but I can drag you to hell with me." Kai Er's cold voice reverberated in the air. She did not look at Long Houchen, but her murderous intent had already risen to the peak. The murderous intent that erupted from the spiritual stove of samsara and the sword of samsara gave off a terrifying feeling, as if it could destroy the world. Even Long Houchen could clearly feel that Kai Er's spiritual stove of samsara had undergone some changes, and the murderous intent was more solid than before. Originally, the murderous intent of her spiritual stove of samsara spread out in all directions, but this time, it directly locked onto a Bao, and only him. "Brother Bao, be careful, that's the spiritual stove of samsara and the sword of samsara." Yu Yi cried out in alarm. Then, Shi, Ling Xiao, and the other two demons quickly appeared behind a Bao. Among the four of them, the previously arrogant orange sorcerer had a weary look on his face, as if he had suffered a serious injury. The other person was the one who had appeared directly behind Abao when they entered this place. He was also the one who ranked second among the 10 demons. It was a young man in a purple robe. Obviously, he was the one who had killed the sorcerer demon hunter. He had almost changed the situation. At the same time that Kyra appeared, the 21st General-Level Monster Hunter's companions appeared behind Long Houchen, and Zhang Fangfang appeared with them. But that was all. In other words, the other warrior demon hunter had also fallen in the battle just now. The spiritual power that erupted from the battle between Long Houchen and Abao was so powerful that the demons could naturally feel it, and so did Kai and the others. The 21st General-level monster hunters attacked in time, severely injuring the orange sorcerer, and at the same time reversing the situation. With their extremely strong cooperation, Zhang Fangfang temporarily took over Long Houchen's original position. They forced their opponent to retreat and rendezvous with Abao. The 21st General-level monster hunters felt better about the situation here. Long Houchen was just a little exhausted, and his opponent was definitely not weak. However, the Devil Race members had a completely different feeling. They were very clear about how powerful Abao was. But he was injured. And he was injured by Long Houchen. Yi was naturally the most shocked. She had known Abao since she was very young. In her heart, if there was anyone in the younger generation that she admired the most, then Abao would definitely be ranked first. Moreover, she was also very clear about Long Houchen's level of cultivation. From her point of view, the two of them should not be able to be compared at all. However, the situation at this moment was completely different from what she had imagined. Although Long Houchen was exhausted, Abao was actually injured. Injured by Long Houchen? And in a one-on-one situation? In terms of numbers, there were 8 people on Long Houchen's side, and 5 on the demon's side, but one of them was seriously injured, and Abao was also injured to a certain extent. But overall, the difference in strength between the two sides was not very big. It was very likely that the demons still had the upper hand. Abao's empty gaze had become a little more solid at this time. He looked at the black wings that were gradually opening behind Kai's back, and felt the unparalleled, terrifying murderous intent that could erupt at any time. His eyes gradually narrowed, and his pair of dragon claws made a strange cluck sound. "Let's go," Abao said calmly. "Brother Bao," Ling Xiao called out unwillingly. Abao glanced at her coldly, and the wings on his back spread out. With a light flap, he had already flown away close to the ground. The others did not dare to say anything. Yi looked deeply at Long Houchen and Kai, then quickly followed behind Abao and left. The murderous intent quietly dispersed, and Long Houchen also slowly stood up. His expression did not relax because of the enemy's departure, but became even more solemn. "If this wasn't the fantasy paradise, I'm afraid we'd be finished," Long Houchen muttered. Sima Xian asked in a low voice, "Boss, that guy is that strong?" Long Houchen nodded and said, "Very strong. These demons should have suppressed their strength to enter here. That Abao's strength is at least rank 8, maybe even rank 9. His external spiritual energy is as high as 20,000. Apart from Azura Slash and Azura Stab, almost none of my skills can break through his physical defense. He is afraid of Kai's spiritual stove of samsara. This person knows when to yield and when to stand tall, and does not act impulsively. He will definitely be a great enemy in the future. Also, he is very likely to be one of the successors of the Demon Emperor." As soon as this was said, everyone's expression changed. The successor of the Demon Emperor, what kind of identity was that? Chen Inger was somewhat unconvinced. "So what? Didn't we still chase him away?" Kai said indifferently. "He was injured by Long Houchen, and we dared to chase him away, because he is more afraid of death than we are. As the successor of the Demon Emperor, and the future ruler of the demons, he is not willing to take risk. Otherwise, it is very likely that we will all die here today. Even if I use the full power of the spiritual stove of samsara, I only have a 60% chance of dying together with him. When we face him, it will be the same as when the 6 seniors of the demon gods faced the Demon Emperor." Zhang Fangfang came in front of Long Houchen and said with a face full of gratitude, "Fortunately, you guys arrived in time, otherwise I would have died here today. In the end, we still underestimated the number of people the demons brought in this time." As far as I know, other than the two just now, at least 3 of the 10 people who came in have died in battle. The demons have already collected more than 7 spiritual stoves. He did not ask why Long Houchen's team members appeared in Fantasy Paradise, and only told them what he knew. Long Houchen frowned slightly and said, "Let's go, we will collect the 3 spiritual stoves first, and bury the bodies of the demonic beasts first." Everyone returned to the previous battlefield, and the magician demon hunter and warrior demon hunter had died horribly. Long Houchen put their bodies into eternal melody, and was ready to hand them over to their teams after leaving this place. One must know that the death of a demon hunter is a fatal blow to a team, and it is very likely that the team of monster hunters will be disbanded because of this. Moreover, almost all the people who came in this time were the core members of each team. When the demons saw them, they would naturally kill them without mercy, and vice versa. But looking at the current situation, it was clear that the demon hunters were at an absolute disadvantage. However, it was too late to say anything now. Who would have thought that the demons would actually put in so much capital, and sent the first few successors of the 72 demon god pillars? Moreover, they came in with a secret technique that suppressed their strength. They buried the bodies of the dead demonic beasts, and did not even touch their magic crystals. Then, Long Houchen brought his teammates in front of the 3 spiritual stoves. Something strange happened. Yiting slowly floated in front of the 3 spiritual stoves, muttered a few incantations, and a faint golden light wrapped around the 3 spiritual stoves. Suddenly, the 3 spiritual stoves emitted a soft halo, and just like that, they followed Yiting to the front of Long Houchen. Facing the 3 spiritual stoves, everyone's eyes immediately became eager. Long Houchen turned to Zhang Fangfang and said, "Brother Zhang, you choose one first." Me?" Zhang Fangfang looked at Long Houchen in surprise. It was impossible to say that he did not have any thoughts about these 3 spiritual stoves, but he had already suppressed the desire in his heart. Long Houchen was so resourceful that he could bring the entire team here. This was not a matter of strength, but of foundation. Moreover, if the 21st general-level monster hunters were not here, he was afraid that it would be difficult for him to survive. Naturally, he did not have any other thoughts. In the previous battle, he saw with his own eyes the tacit cooperation and powerful strength of the 21st general-level monster hunters. Although other than Long Houchen and Kair, the others had not broken through to the 6th rank, they were very powerful when they worked together. He never expected that Long Houchen would let him choose one first. Long Houchen said, "These spiritual stoves were first discovered by Brother Zhang. Without Brother Zhang, we may not be able to drive away those demons. Brother Zhang, don't stand on ceremony, please." Zhang Fangfang took a deep breath and looked at the others around Long Houchen. Regarding Long Houchen's words, no one objected, not even a look of dissatisfaction. After a brief internal struggle, Zhang Fangfang's expression returned to normal, and he said sincerely, "Brother Long, thank you. But I can't take it. I won't deny that I also desire the spiritual stoves. But, if it wasn't for your participation in the battle just now, I would have lost my life. You are my saviors. How can I take the spiritual stoves that you fought so hard for?" Brother Zhang. Long Houchen still wanted to decline, but Zhang Fangfang raised his hand to stop him. He said seriously, "Brother Long, how about this? I only have a small request. I hope that I can be with you in the next mission. If we are lucky enough to find another spiritual stove, how about giving it to me? These 3, I really can't take it." As soon as he said this, the 21st general-level monster hunters looked at Zhang Fangfang with surprise and admiration. Faced with the temptation of spiritual stoves, not everyone could give up. Although he also said that he could have the spiritual stoves if they found them in the future, who could guarantee that they would find another spiritual stove? Long Houchen was not a pretentious person, and time waited for no man. After thinking for a while, he said, "All right, if that's the case, then I won't stand on ceremony. Lin Xian, that red spiritual stove is yours. Sima, that purple spiritual stove with an extremely berserk radiance is yours. Yuan, you absorb the silver spiritual stove. Start immediately, we will help you guard. The members of the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad didn't just trust Long Houchen, they also had complete faith in him. Hearing his words, no one said anything, and the three of them immediately walked out and began to absorb the energy from the three spiritual stoves. Because they could only absorb them temporarily, they could not use them directly. Therefore, it only took a moment for the three of them to complete their respective fusion. Lin Xian and Wang Yuan were slightly better, they only looked happy. Sima Xian had just finished fusing with the spiritual stove, and could not help but exclaim, "So good. It electrocuted me." Long Houchen smiled and said, "The spiritual stove that Lin Xian fused with is called Heart of Flame. It is a type of flame with an extremely high temperature. It cannot help fire magicians cultivate spiritual power, and it does not have any skills. However, it could increase the quality of the flames released by fire mages to an extremely high level. The temperature is also very scary. This spiritual stove of Heart of Flame doesn't seem to be very useful, but from its ranking in the top 5 spiritual stoves that magicians can absorb, it can be seen that it is very powerful. Yuan's spiritual stove is a rare spatial spiritual stove. It is very compatible with her. It is also the most practical of the known spatial spiritual stove. If Lin Xian's Heart of Flame is used too much, there is a possibility of the flame backfiring, but Yuan's spiritual stove is definitely not dangerous. This spiritual stove is called the Space Door. Simply put, it is teleportation. If I remember correctly, the number of times and distance that the Space Door can be used per day will change as it evolves. Moreover, for spatial warriors, after having this spiritual stove, it is very useful for learning other spatial skills. Yuan and Lin Xian's luck is very good. Boss, what about me? What is this spiritual stove that you want me to absorb? I'm about to have an orgasm from the electricity. Sima Xian's face was full of pain and happiness. Long Houchen chuckled and said, "Didn't you want a spiritual stove with high explosive power? This is as you wish. This spiritual stove is a rare spiritual stove, it is very rare. It is of the lightning attribute. Anyone can absorb it." Saying this, he glanced at Zhang Fangfang. His original intention was to let Zhang Fangfang choose this spiritual stove. As for the 2 spiritual stoves that were more compatible with Wang Yuan and Lin Xian, he couldn't let go of them, especially Wang Yuan's spiritual stove. The rarity of the spatial spiritual stove could even be compared to the top 3 known spiritual stoves. Sima's spiritual stove is called Purple Thunder. It has no active skills, but it has a very strong passive ability. As long as your body can withstand it, after this spiritual stove is triggered, all of your attacks will carry the powerful power of lightning. As for how strong it is, you will know when you try it yourself. However, I must remind you that because of this Purple Thunder spiritual stove's dominance, when you truly accept its test, I'm afraid it will be more difficult. You must be mentally prepared. Sima Xian's eyes lit up. Good, I like this. Although he looked rough, he was actually very meticulous. Although Long Houchen didn't say what the true power of this Purple Thunder spiritual stove was, he could guess a little. Even among the rare attributes, the explosive power of lightning was the strongest. After obtaining 4 spiritual stoves, Long Houchen's mood was a lot more relaxed. These were all rare treasures of heaven and earth, truly good stuff. Just these 4 spiritual stoves were enough to make their trip worthwhile. Moreover, there was still time. It was hard to say if there were any spiritual stoves that hadn't been taken away. Everyone moved again. With the addition of Zhang Fangfang, they now had a total of 8 people. Even if they encountered those demons, they would have the power to fight. Of course, the prerequisite was that the demons hadn't all gathered together. Time passed slowly. On the way, they didn't encounter any other spiritual stoves. Long Houchen also didn't sense anything, only a few demon beast corpses. Just like before, they buried it. Night fell. There was no difference between the outside world and the dream space. There was actually day and night. The 8 people gathered together and found a relatively hidden place to rest. Their first day in dream paradise passed just like that, and this was just the beginning. According to the information given by Ling Xiao, there was still a chance in the next 2 days, but it would be more dangerous. Chapter 110. Before setting off, Ling Xiao gave the 10 demon hunters who were about to enter the dream paradise a detailed explanation of what might happen inside. Generally speaking, the dream paradise was relatively peaceful. It was only when they encountered a spiritual stove that they might encounter a guardian demonic beast. However, there were also some special circumstances. For example, if the murderous aura in the dream paradise was too strong, it was likely to cause a mutation inside. There were about 20 spiritual stoves produced in the dream paradise each time. However, before these spiritual stoves were truly absorbed, they were ownerless. In other words, even if they were temporarily integrated with the spiritual stove, once they were killed, the spiritual stove would still regain its freedom. Ling Xiao told a story that happened once. About 300 years ago, when the dream paradise opened, the people who entered the Temple League had a disagreement because of the spiritual stove, and they ended up fighting each other. At that time, it also caused a mutation in the dream paradise. The mutation began on the second day, and only 2 of the 20 people who entered the dream paradise survived. At the same time, Ling Xiao had also earnestly told them that the best way to obtain a spiritual stove in the dream paradise was to get the approval of the guardian demonic beast. This method was the safest and wouldn't anger the dream paradise. However, this time it was obviously not so peaceful. The massacre of the demons was probably enough to anger the dream paradise. Perhaps they had already obtained a lot of spiritual stoves. However, once the mutation occurred on the second day, no one would be able to leave before the end of the 3 days unless they had a dream gem like Long Houchen and Kair. Long Houchen gathered his partners, including Zhang Fangfang. He told them about the possibility of the mutation that Ling Xiao had mentioned. This is the current situation. I estimate that the mutation in the dream paradise is very likely to occur. Once it occurs, we will also face a great crisis. So far, we have obtained 4 spiritual stoves. If we leave now, it will be considered a great harvest. However, once it is tomorrow, then it is likely that we won't be able to leave even if we want to. We can only wait until the end of the 3 days. Should we go or stay? Let's decide. Of course, stay. This is a once-in-100 years opportunity. If I don't get a few more spiritual stoves, how can I be satisfied? Lin Xian said without hesitation. Sima Xian curled his lips in disdain and said, "You're just a money grubber. However, I also feel that we should stay." Surprisingly, the 21st general-level monster hunters had the same opinion. Stay. In the end, everyone's gaze focused on Zhang Fangfang. Zhang Fangfang smiled and said, "Since all of you have decided to stay, and it is very likely that I will obtain the next spiritual stove, I naturally have to risk my life to accompany you. Although I think staying is a little radical." The best thing about Zhang Fangfang was that he was not pretentious. Long Houchen could feel that his honesty came from the bottom of his heart. That was why she had accepted him a long time ago. That's right, choosing to stay was definitely radical, but Long Houchen was also inclined towards this decision. The reason was simple: they had a way out. It was not the dream gem, but the Tower of Eternity. As long as Long Houchen was given enough time, he could lead his companions to hide in the Tower of Eternity to pass the remaining dangerous time. Before the dream paradise ended, he and Kair could come back. Therefore, no matter what danger they encountered, they had a way out. After thinking for a moment, Long Houchen took out his dream gem and handed it to Zhang Fangfang. "Brother Zhang, we hit it off at first sight. You are a few years older than us, but you have helped us several times regardless of the past. This is the dream gem, take it. Once you encounter a crisis that you cannot resist, no matter what state the dream paradise is in, you can use this dream gem to teleport out and stay away from danger. Zhang Fangfang was surprised and said, "There is such a thing? If you give it to me, do you still have a use for it?" Long Haochen smiled indifferently and said, "Although Brother Zhang didn't ask, I also know that you have doubts in your heart. But this is our team's secret, I can't tell you. What I can say is that since I can bring them in, I can also bring them out. Don't worry. You must keep this dream gem well, it can be used to save your life at a critical moment." Zhang Fangfang thought for a moment and said, "Okay, I won't say any more polite words." At that moment, he happily put away the dream gem. Just as they ate their dry rations and began to rest, the entire dream paradise began to quietly change. The gorgeous fog that floated in the seemingly endless forest of the dream paradise gradually became solid, and finally condensed into light spots that flew in all directions. Vaguely, the dreamy feeling of the dream paradise was gradually replaced by reality, and the aura of life also became stronger. However, a murderous aura also appeared. Dawn. When the first ray of dawn appeared in the distant sky, Long Haochen was startled by a cry of surprise and jumped up from the ground. When they rested last night, they arranged for everyone to take turns to keep watch. At that moment, the one on watch was Lin Xian, and at that moment, he was looking up as if he had seen an extremely inconceivable thing. His cry of surprise also startled the others awake. Everyone followed his gaze and looked into the distance, and for a moment, their pupils involuntarily shrank. Each and every one of their faces revealed a look of shock. They couldn't help but be shocked. In the sky, a dense seven-colored cloud of light floated there, and a gentle energy fluctuation circulated in the air. The dazzling auspicious cloud was gentle and moving, and in the middle of that auspicious cloud, a seven-colored ball of light was slowly descending from the sky. Even the rays of the sun became gentle because of this auspicious cloud, and all the aura of life in the dream paradise seemed to quietly revolve around it. That's a spiritual stove?" Zhang Fangfang said in shock. The seven-colored ball of light that appeared in the middle of the auspicious cloud was bigger than any of the 20 or so spiritual stoves that had appeared yesterday. Moreover, just from the radiance that it emitted at the moment it appeared, it could be seen that this spiritual stove was extraordinary. Subconsciously, everyone's gaze focused on Long Haochen. Only he knew about spiritual stoves here. However, what they saw was Long Haochen's bitter smile. "I don't know what this spiritual stove is either. Among the spiritual stoves that Father has told me about, there is definitely no such thing. If it really is a spiritual stove, then there is only one explanation. That is, it has never appeared on the mainland before, and is a brand new type of spiritual stove." Shock appeared on everyone's face, because they were all demon hunters, and they clearly remembered that in the Monster Hunter's mission tower, there was a mission that had no level restrictions, but the reward was as high as 100,000 merit points. Discover and obtain a spiritual stove that had never appeared before. From the time this mission appeared until now, it had been completed 5 times, but the mission had always existed, and would continue to exist. A brand new and unknown spiritual stove, no one knew how strong it was, but it appeared in this dream paradise, and it appeared in a separate form. How could the power of this 7-colored spiritual stove be weak? What are we waiting for? Let's go. Chen Ying couldn't wait any longer and said excitedly. "No, wait a minute." Long Haochen stopped the restless crowd. "Don't you think it's strange?" Everyone looked at him. Han Yu said in a low voice, "It's a little strange. Yesterday the leader just said that there might be a change in Dream Paradise today, and today, such a magical scene appeared. Perhaps it really is a spiritual stove, but it could also be a huge temptation." Zhang Fangfang nodded and said, "I agree. Without enough temptation, how can outsiders like us fight for it? Even if Dream Paradise didn't arrange any danger, the seven-colored spiritual stove is descending so slowly, and its position is even more obvious. Not only will we meet our companions, but we will also meet the demons. Long Houchen, tell us, what should we do? Long Houchen looked at the gradually descending seven-colored light, and after thinking for a moment, he said in a low voice, "We still have to go. Even if it's to save our comrades who entered here with us, we still have to go. However, I have to remind everyone again. If we encounter a powerful magical beast, no one is allowed to attack it. Even if it takes the initiative to attack us, we can only defend passively. This matter is very important and no one can ignore it. Otherwise, it's very likely that all our previous efforts will be in vain." Seeing how serious Long Houchen was, the others nodded in agreement. After thinking for a moment, Long Houchen let Zhang Fangfang and Han Yu be together, responsible for the team's rear defense, and the rest of the formation remained the same. Under his lead, everyone went straight in the direction where the seven-colored light was descending. After advancing for less than 100 meters, Long Houchen suddenly stopped. "Did you guys notice? Where are those light clouds? They're all gone." Everyone looked around. Sure enough, the colorful light clouds that had been the most distinctive feature of Fantasy Paradise had all disappeared. It looked like an ordinary forest, except that the vegetation was especially dense. Long Houchen said in a low voice, "It seems that we guessed correctly, there really is a change in the space." "Boss, what do we do now?" Sima Xian asked. Long Houchen raised his hand, and threw Light's punishment to Han Yu behind him, while he took out Brilliant Holy Shield. "We still have to go over. Don't forget what I said just now, no one is allowed to attack the magical beast." Kai had been following behind Long Houchen, and her gaze was gentle as she watched his steady command. In fact, her intelligence and perception were not inferior to Long Houchen. However, she was willing to be the woman behind his back. Unless Long Houchen made a fundamental mistake in his judgment, she would not easily interrupt. Prestige was honed through this kind of continuous difficult process. As the saying went, looking at a mountain will kill a horse. The seven-colored light seemed to be not far away, and it was slowly descending, but in reality, they had been rushing for a whole hour, and still did not see the shadow of the seven-colored light that had fallen into the forest. However, the changes in their surroundings were still very obvious. They could clearly feel that the atmosphere in Dream Paradise was becoming more and more austere, and even the life aura did not seem so gentle. Roar! A low roar suddenly sounded in front of them, and immediately after, a huge black shadow pounced in the direction of Long Houchen. This black shadow leaped down from the tree in front of them, so it appeared very suddenly. Even with Long Houchen's perception, he actually did not notice its existence beforehand. "Everyone, don't move." Long Houchen took a step forward, and the radiant holy shield in his hands was placed horizontally above his head, blocking with his divine defense. With a loud clang, Long Houchen's figure staggered backward, and his feet left 2 deep marks on the ground. As for the huge black figure, it bounced back and landed on the ground not far away. The dense golden light of the Vengeance of Light shone on Long Houchen's body, but he did not have any intention of attacking. Instead, he put away the blue rain and hibiscus of light in his hand. "Don't be nervous, my friend." Long Houchen tried to make his voice as gentle as possible, and looked at the black shadow that was 3 meters tall in front of him. This shadow was the magical beast that they had encountered for the first time, the huge black gorilla. The black gorilla's eyes were obviously somewhat unfriendly. It stared at Long Houchen, and it let out a low roar. The light elemental fairy Yiting floated out, and said something to the black gorilla in a gibberish. Long Houchen did not understand the language of beasts, but Yiting understood his words. He immediately said, "Yiting, tell this friend that we have no ill intentions. We just felt the changes in Fantasy Paradise, and felt that you might be in danger, so we came to see if we could help." Yiting quickly translated Long Houchen's words to the black gorilla. The black gorilla slowly walked in front of Long Houchen, and just like last time, it stretched out its huge finger. Long Houchen did not hesitate to put his palm on its finger, and looked at the gorilla sincerely. He vaguely understood that the gorilla could feel the changes in the other's mind through this method. Long Houchen had no ill intentions in his heart, and he was a kind-hearted scion of the light. In terms of inner purity, there were probably few humans who could compare to him. After a short period of time, the vigilance and anger in the gorilla's eyes gradually disappeared. It withdrew its big hand, nodded at Long Houchen, and then turned and walked into the depths of the forest. Yiting immediately sent a message to Long Houchen to follow. Under Long Houchen's lead, the group of 8 quickly followed the gorilla and walked into the dense forest. After walking less than 100 meters, they saw some powerful magical beasts appear in their field of vision. These magical beasts seemed very irritable. When they saw Long Houchen and the others, these outsiders' first reaction was to pounce on them. Fortunately, the gorilla led the way, and its low growls made the magical beasts' hostility towards Long Houchen and the others disappear. Looking at the surrounding magical beasts, Long Houchen was secretly shocked. These magical beasts were generally around level 7 or level 8. There were no particularly powerful existences. However, they won in terms of numbers. In just a short while, they saw close to 20 of them. Moreover, these magical beasts were moving in the same direction as them, in the direction where the colorful light had landed. Zhang Fangfang looked at Long Houchen in front of him, and could not help but admire him. The experience just now had undoubtedly confirmed that Long Houchen's choice was correct. What surprised him the most was that Long Houchen could actually deal with the aggressive magical beasts in Fantasy Paradise, and it was obvious that he had been recognized. This was something he could never have imagined. In fact, it was the first time in Fantasy Paradise that someone like Long Houchen had been truly recognized by the magical beasts. The prerequisite for this situation seemed to be very simple. One was to make the right choice, and choose to be on good terms with the magical beasts and the surrounding environment as soon as they entered Fantasy Paradise. They would never do anything to destroy it. With this, at least they would not be hated by the magical beasts. As for the second point, it was Long Houchen's scion of light constitution. The one who was most compatible with Fantasy Paradise was not the scion of light constitution like Long Houchen's, but the son of nature, who had extremely rare and extreme life attributes. There was no doubt that the possibility of the son of nature appearing was smaller than the scion of light, but it was not as if they had never appeared before. The last son of nature to appear was the creator of this Fantasy Paradise, the goddess of nature. Therefore, she should be the saint of life. Apart from the son of nature constitution, she was slightly inferior in the 2 attributes that were closely related to life, light and water. The importance of these 2 attributes was above that of wood and earth. As the scion of light, Long Houchen would naturally be favored by Fantasy Paradise. The test that the gorilla gave him was undoubtedly a test from Fantasy Paradise. After passing the test with the scion of light constitution, he was truly recognized. Thus, he directly joined the camp of Fantasy Paradise. This meant that the overall strength of Long Houchen and the others was relatively weak, but they could get the support of Fantasy Paradise. His conjecture became a reality, but it did not make Long Houchen relax. Instead, he was even more worried. His worry stemmed from the rules of Fantasy Paradise itself. After more than a day of contact, he found that although Fantasy Paradise limited the strength of outsiders, it also had certain restrictions on itself. Otherwise, with such a huge life force in Fantasy Paradise, how could it not give birth to 9th and 10th level magical beasts? Although the number of magical beasts in front of him was not small, could they really stop a Bao and the others? Long Houchen had personally witnessed a Bao's strength. He was very clear that last time, it could be said that he could only injure his opponent with a surprise attack. In a situation where he was prepared, facing a Bao in a one-on-one situation, he actually had no chance at all. It could be said that with a strong foundation, Abao's own strength was already above the rules of Fantasy Paradise, but he was not bound by the rules. Coupled with his companions, their overall strength might not be enough to compete with the magical beasts, but if they insisted on rushing into the midst of the magical beasts, it would not be difficult to obtain the strange colorful spiritual stove. Under the guidance of the gorilla, they passed through the increasingly dense jungle. After walking for another hour or so, a strong spiritual fluctuation appeared in front of Long Houchen's perception. The battle had already begun, and it felt very intense. However, what made his heart heavy was that apart from darkness and life, there was no other existence of the spiritual attribute that appeared in his perception. Long Houchen was very clear about what this meant. He was afraid that among the top 10 monster hunters who entered Fantasy Paradise this time, only he, Kai and Zhang Fangfang were left. The dark attribute must belong to demons, and all the magical beasts in Fantasy Paradise, no matter what their attributes were, carried a strong aura of life. With the perception of Fantasy Paradise's favoritism, Long Houchen knew that his intuition could not be wrong. After passing through a huge tree and shrub, the battlefield appeared in front of Long Houchen's eyes. There was a small hill here, and there were hundreds of magical beasts around the hill. The strange thing was that these magical beasts were not chaotic. Instead, they attacked in a very orderly manner, and there was not even an extra roar. The enemies on the other side were naturally the demons. Abao appeared in Long Houchen's sight again. His injuries had obviously healed, and even the demons that had been seriously injured by the 21st general-level monster hunters seemed to have recovered. A simple count showed that there were 9 demons here. In other words, other than the cyan flaming demon Shen Shang that Long Houchen and the others had killed, the other demons had not suffered any damage in yesterday's test. It was obvious that they had probably obtained the spiritual stove. Are they all dead? Zhang Fangfang smiled bitterly at the back. One had to know that many of those who came in this time were the core members of the general-level monster hunters. The death of 7 of them at once was a very serious blow to the monster hunters. At present, the situation on the battlefield was still very unclear. The target of Abao and the others was obviously the small hill that towered over 100 meters, and the magical beasts were risking their lives to stop them from moving forward. The battle was very fierce. Although the individual strength of the magical beasts was not as good as the demons, their cooperation was very tacit and orderly. They surrounded the demons from all sides, and with the cooperation of various attributes, they forcibly blocked the path of the demons. The gorilla let out an angry growl, turned around, and called out to Long Houchen and the others, and directly ran in the direction of the small hill. Long Houchen hurried to catch up with his companions. Due to the gorilla's growl opening the way, the magical beasts that had entered a state of battle did not stop them from moving forward. The appearance of Long Houchen and the others naturally attracted Abao's attention. Seeing that they were actually heading straight for the hill, Abao's eyes could not help but shine coldly. His pair of forelimbs that had transformed into dragon claws suddenly tore a magical beast in front of him to pieces, and led the other 8 people to increase the speed of their assault. At this moment, on the small hill, a clear and pleasant voice, like that of an oriole leaving the valley, rang out. The attacks of the magical beasts instantly became more ferocious, and forcibly stopped the advancement of Abao and the other 8 demons in their tracks. On the towering small hill stood a little girl who looked to be only 6 or 7 years old. The little girl's makeup was like jade, and she looked very cute. Her skin was white and tender, and there was some baby fat on her face. Her light blue long hair was combed into 2 small braids, which swayed along with her movements. Her pair of white and tender little hands were constantly pointing downwards. She was the one who had made that crisp sound. Is she commanding the magical beasts? Long Houchen looked at the little girl in shock. He had already followed the gorilla to the top of the hill. The life aura here seemed to be more vigorous, and the rich life aura was full of exuberance. The beautiful little girl's face was filled with anger, and her pair of big green eyes exuded a firm and resolute light. The gorilla came to her side, and actually bowed its head respectfully to her, and growled a few times. Hearing its voice, the little girl turned to look at Long Houchen and the others. As her gaze swept across the area, it almost stopped on Long Houchen in the next second. Her green eyes revealed a strong sense of shock. "Human, are you the son of light?" The little girl spoke in the human language, and her words were very clear. Long Houchen nodded. "Hello, little girl, we are here to help you. What do you need me to do?" He did not directly lead his companions to join the battle, because he could see that the little girl had excellent control of the overall situation. Under her command, the magical beast's casualties were minimized, and the attacks on the demons were also very fierce. Under such circumstances, it would not be good for them to join in rashly. The little girl giggled and said, "Finally, there is good news. That's great. Son of Light, you guys stay here and protect me. I will talk to you after I have turned these filthy things into nourishment for heaven." "Okay." Long Houchen agreed readily, and led his companions to stand beside the little girl, watching the battle from the top of the hill. At the same time, he made some simple arrangements to let his companions recover their cultivation as soon as possible. "My name is Long Houchen, you can directly call me by my name," Long Houchen said to the little girl with a smile. The little girl directed the battle below, and turned her head to say, "My name is Yi Xiaolei. Although I do not like this name, it was given to me by my sister, and I cannot change it. You can call me Xiaolei." After saying this, she changed into that strange voice again, and issued a series of urgent orders from her mouth. The magical beasts below changed their formation again, and their attacks increased. At this time, magical beasts continued to join the battle from all sides of the hill. From the looks of it, the 9 demons did not seem to have the upper hand at all. Moreover, their combat power was also being depleted in the continuous battle. Zhang Fangfang stood at the side, his lips tightly shut like the others, but his heart was filled with shock. It was not only him, the others also had strange looks in their eyes, and from time to time, they would sneak a glance at the little girl. The reason was very simple, because this little girl named Yi Xiaolei was emitting a faint 7-colored light. Other than her, there was no other 7-colored light on the top of the hill. Could it be that she was that 7-colored ball of light? Zhang Fangfang had another doubt in his heart. Why did this girl call Long Houchen the son of light? It could be said that they currently had an absolute advantage, because they were standing on the side of fantasy paradise. How did Long Houchen do this? The battle continued, and Long Houchen carefully observed Yi Xiaolei's command. Although he did not understand Yi Xiaolei's special language, he could judge her command method. Yi Xiaolei's command was actually not complicated. The first thing she did was to make these magical beasts fight as a whole, like an army, instead of a plate of loose sand. This way there would be no unnecessary sacrifices. The magical beasts that rushed at the front were those with amazing defense, and could fight head-on with the demons, while the magical beasts behind were good at magic attacks. Their fighting style seemed to be no different from that of humans. More importantly, once the magical beasts in front were seriously injured, they would immediately retreat under Yi Xiaolei's command, and there were a few specialized magical beasts at the back who were responsible for healing them. They emitted layers of green light, and soon their injuries would be healed, and they would return to the battlefield as reserves. Whenever the 9 demons were about to launch a powerful skill, Yi Xiaolei could always judge in advance, and let the magical beasts retreat or launch a frenzied attack, dodge, defend, or destroy the opponent's skill. The 9 demons' cooperation was not very tacit, but their individual strength was very strong. Even Yu Yi, who Long Houchen knew, seemed to have improved a lot. A bow was extremely powerful, and the attacks of the magical beasts could not cause any damage to him at all. However, under such circumstances, they were forcibly contained, unable to break through the magical beast's defense line. Even the damage inflicted on the magical beasts was very limited. Long Houchen's originally somewhat worried heart was now at ease. Yi Xiaolei's existence was like the brain of these magical beasts. With her as their commander, it would not be easy for the demons to attack. This was, after all, the fantasy paradise, her home field. Moreover, Long Houchen was also very curious about Yi Xiaolei's identity. The seven-colored light meant that she was very likely the seven-colored light that appeared before, but why did she appear in human form? Could it be that she was, thinking of this, Long Houchen couldn't help but be shocked. He recalled the words that his father had once told him about the classification of spiritual stoves. Long Xingwu had told Long Houchen that spiritual stoves could also be divided into 5 levels. Among them, the saint's spiritual stove that Long Houchen possessed could only be divided into the 5th level, which was the lowest level. The classification of spiritual stoves was based on the spiritual stove's own use, power, and development potential, as well as the situation of the backlash. The reason why the saint's spiritual stove was only evaluated as the 5th level was because its special ability had not been publicized by the Knights Templars. Otherwise, it would have entered the 3rd level. The majority of the 5th level spiritual stoves were for support or defense. There were very few spiritual stoves that could attack. They only had 1 skill on each side, and could evolve once or twice. The saint's spiritual stove was definitely an exception among the 5th level spiritual stoves. In many people's view, the greatest use of the saint's spiritual stove was to be used as the core of the team when the user's cultivation was low. However, after the user's cultivation was high, the effect of the saint's spiritual stove would also weaken. After reaching the 4th level, there were all kinds of spiritual stoves, but most of them only had 1 skill. The main difference between them and the 5th level spiritual stove was the power. The 3rd level spiritual stove had at least 2 skills, and the power of the skills had to reach a certain level. For example, Long Houchen's saint's spiritual stove could only pull within a certain range of power, so it couldn't be considered to have reached that level. Kai Er's spiritual stove of 1,000 strikes belonged to the category of spiritual stoves of the 3rd level. It's just that she still hasn't evolved, so the spiritual stove of 1,000 strikes can only have a single offensive ability. Once she completes her evolution, the spiritual stove of 1,000 strikes attack power will increase by a large margin. Once it reached the 2nd level, it would already be considered a relatively powerful spiritual stove. Among the 74 known spiritual stoves, there were only 7 types of 2nd level spiritual stoves, and each type had at least 3 practical skills. Of course, the backlash from them wouldn't be small. Of course, there were some that only had 1 skill, but that skill was incomparably powerful. For example, the spiritual stove of Kai Er's father, Xing Lingxin, was a 2nd level spiritual stove. Being able to possess a 3rd level spiritual stove could at least increase a professional's strength by a large margin. If one possessed a 2nd level spiritual stove, then they would have the tyrannical strength to reverse the situation on the battlefield. Moreover, the higher the level of the spiritual stove, the stronger the user's strength would be. If Xing Lingxin's cultivation could reach the 9th level, then when he used the spiritual stove of childhood reversal, even the top 10 demon gods would have to avoid his all-out attack. As for the 1st level spiritual stove, there was currently only 1 known, and that was Kai Er's spiritual stove of samsara. The 1st level spiritual stove's requirement wasn't limited to the number of skills, but rather the eruption of power when the spiritual stove was used. The requirement was very simple, surpassing 2 levels. If a spiritual stove could use it to kill an expert surpassing it by 2 levels, then this spiritual stove would be a 1st level spiritual stove. Until now, only Kai Er's spiritual stove of samsara could be determined to be a 1st level spiritual stove. Of course, Long Houchen was very clear about the strength of its backlash. When Long Xingwu explained the 5 levels of spiritual stoves to Long Houchen, He said to Long Houchen that there was a type of spiritual stove in the legends. This type of spiritual stove was definitely a first-level spiritual stove, or even higher. But it had only appeared in legends. In the entire history of the Temple League, it had never existed. It was said that the last time it appeared was during the Glorious Era, and at that time, the most powerful of the three empires, the king of the empire, had that spiritual stove. This legendary spiritual stove was called the intelligent spiritual stove. In other words, the spiritual stove itself was no longer a treasure, but a real life form, a life form with high intelligence. Its evolution was limitless. Its use was even more immeasurable. Long Xingwu's evaluation at that time was that this spiritual stove only appeared in legends. But it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Looking at Yi Xiaolei, who was calmly commanding, Long Houchen couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Could it be that this little girl in front of him was actually the legend that his father spoke of? He couldn't be sure, but if it was really like this, then Yi Xiaolei's identity would be obvious. The elder sister that she had just mentioned was probably the creator of this dream paradise, and she should be the guardian of this dream paradise. Even someone like Long Houchen, with his temperament, fell into a trance in an instant. The intelligent spiritual stove was an existence that surpassed Kai Er's spiritual stove of samsara. However, he quickly calmed his mind. No matter what, he couldn't do anything that was disadvantageous to this little girl. At the same time, he wouldn't allow anyone to harm her. This feeling came from the bottom of his heart. When Long Houchen first saw Yi Xiaolei, he had this feeling. He didn't know why he had this feeling, but when he felt the change in his mentality, a faint smile appeared on his face. This kind of mentality made him feel very comfortable and at ease. This was just like how a person would feel when doing a good deed. Doing good deeds, in the end, wasn't because they hoped to be rewarded, nor was it because they hoped to be blessed by the heavens, but because they felt at ease. Peace of mind, peace of mind, peace of mind, peace of mind. Chapter 111. Just as Long Houchen was thinking about it, the battle below suddenly changed. The attack power of the 9 demons, who were completely suppressed by the beast tide, suddenly weakened, so much so that the beasts attacking them shrank a lot. The reason for the weakening of the attack was very simple. A Bao suddenly withdrew from the ranks of the attack and returned to his companions. He was talking to a person whose body was shining with an orange glow, the person who had been severely injured by the 21st General-Level Monster Hunters. His expression was still indifferent, but the demons who released the orange magic did not seem so calm. "Be careful, they may have changed," Long Houchen whispered to Yi Xiaolei beside him. "Okay." Yi Xiaolei responded softly, and her expression became solemn. Although nothing had happened yet, she also felt that something was wrong. Even though they were so far away, Long Houchen could vaguely feel that a Bao's emotions at this time seemed to be like a forbidden spell that could erupt at any time. The demons who released the orange magic seemed to be fighting against something. The two of them actually had a situation similar to an argument. This was not normal. If a Bao was the prince of the heaven-defying demon dragon clan, then why would his words be resisted? Unless, be careful, they may be activating the ability to break through the rules of fantasy paradise, Long Houchen said anxiously. At this time, the demons seemed to have finally been convinced by a Bao. As a Bao rejoined the battle, a layer of rich orange light bloomed from within them. The orange-red color was not strong, but it gave off a strange feeling. The originally rich life aura in the air seemed to have become a little stagnant because of the appearance of this orange color. What was even more surprising was that this layer of light did not break through the limit of 10,000 spiritual energy. What was going on? Both Long Houchen and Yi Xiaolei were a little confused. They both felt the pressure brought by the orange light, but why was the light still within the limits of the rules? Zhang Fangfang suddenly cried out involuntarily, "Star Devil Race, that person should be from the Star Devil Race. Be careful, he is going to cast the Great Prophecy spell." Hearing the words Great Prophecy Spell, Long Houchen's expression suddenly changed. The Great Prophecy Spell was a powerful magic unique to the Star Demons, and only the direct bloodline of the Star Demon could cast it. The cost of casting it was very high. Even the Star Demon himself had to consume a certain amount of life to cast it. Without the assistance of the Demon God Pillars, the price of using the Great Prophecy technique was their lives. The biggest feature of Greater Prophecy was that it did not belong to the category of magic, and it could not be rated. It was an existence similar to divine spells. No wonder it could be used here without breaking the rules. At this moment Yi Xiaolei, who was next to Long Houchen, suddenly trembled. Then, the rainbow light on her body suddenly became denser. A tyrannical life aura surged out from her body in an earth-shattering manner. Beside her, Long Houchen and the rest of the 8 were surprised to feel that their spiritual power had actually increased in an instant. It was not the restoration of spiritual power, but the strengthening of the foundation of spiritual power, just like what they obtained through their own cultivation. Long Houchen, Kair, and Zhang Fangfang fared slightly better. The 3 of them were pleasantly surprised to feel that their strength was increasing, as if their spiritual energy was increasing by almost 10 points every second. In the blink of an eye, his spiritual power had increased by 100%. On the other hand, the other 5 were feeling different. Lin Xian, Wang Yuanyuan, Sima Xian, Han Yu, and Chen Yinger were all at the peak of the 5th order. With this sudden increase in spiritual power, the 5 of them felt the bottleneck that had been restricting them tremble violently. They were all smart people, so how could they not seize such an opportunity? They immediately used their spiritual power to charge towards the bottleneck. The life spiritual power that Yi Xiaolei emitted was not only strong but gentle, it could be accepted by any attribute other than death and darkness. As this huge life aura spread out, the demonic beasts outside seemed to have consumed a miraculous elixir. Their strength increased exponentially, and their attacks instantly became stronger. Even a powerhouse like a Bao found it difficult to resist. Without a doubt, Yi Xiaolei had begun to attack with all her might after sensing the danger. However, on the other side, the orange light in the demon's formation began to become more intense. In the sky, a huge orange star pattern appeared, and the dense and intense starlight shone brightly. Every time it shone in the air, Yi Xiaolei's face would become a little paler. Long Houchen, this great prophecy spell is going to seal me. I will be sealed for at least 2 hours. Protect me for 2 hours. When I break free from the great prophecy spell, it will be the time of their death. Yi Xiaolei's crisp childlike voice was filled with anger and unwillingness, but she still slowly sat down cross-legged, clasped her hands in front of her chest, and closed her eyes. At this moment, the life aura on her body doubled again, and turned into a green halo that spread out. Lin Xian, Wang Yuanyuan, Sima Xian, Chen Yinger, and Han Yu let out sounds that were close to moaning. 5 pairs of spiritual wings spread out at the same time. They had actually completed their breakthroughs at this critical moment and condensed their spiritual orifices. The gift that Yi Xiaolei gave them was simply too great. It helped the 5 of them break through the bottleneck of the rank 6 realm. If they had cultivated normally, they might not be able to complete this breakthrough even if they had a few more months. However, when the final ring of green light rippled out, a layer of orange light appeared around Yi Xiaolei, enveloping her completely. She was not even able to give off a sliver of her presence. The Great Prophecy spell was an extremely powerful divine spell with many uses. How could its power be weak when it came to such a huge price? To put it simply, if the Great Prophecy spell was used on an ordinary person, even if it predicted their death, it was very likely that they would die immediately. However, Yi Xiaolei was obviously not an ordinary person. Hence, even if the Great Prophecy spell was used on her, it could only seal her temporarily. At the same time that she was sealed, the demons who had cast the Great Prophecy spell suddenly exploded like a smashed watermelon, turning into a rain of blood. Wherever the blood rain passed, At least a dozen demonic beasts were shot full of holes. That was the price of casting the Great Prophecy spell. However, with the Great Prophecy spell, it had undoubtedly changed the situation of the battle. With his death, 2 soft spiritual stoves and an orange inheritance crown magical crystal rose at the same time, showing his position among the star demons and the gains from entering the fantasy paradise. Abao's expression was cold, and he was not moved by the death of his companion at all. He had relied on an oath and a promise to make his companion cast the crucial Great Prophecy spell. Even though the price of his promise was not small, if he could get his hands on Yi Xiaolei, it would be worth it no matter how big the price was. It was not just him. Even the Demon Emperor was determined to get his hands on Yi Xiaolei. The demons had attacked the Southgard Pass madly at all costs, and they had even made a deal with the Temple Alliance, allowing the 10 demons to enter the illusory paradise this time. They only had one final target, Yi Xiaolei. The Temple League thought that they had taken advantage of the situation, but they did not know how important Yi Xiaolei was to the demons, especially to the Demon Emperor. Only the father and son, the Demon Emperor and Abao, knew about this secret. After losing the command of Yi Xiaolei, the attacks of the magical beasts became chaotic. In their anger, they charged at the demons in a frenzy. Even though the intensity of their attacks skyrocketed in an instant, many of their efforts were in vain after they lost their order. A dark purple circle of light spread out from under Po's feet, enveloping him and his 7 friends. Instantly, every single one of them was covered in a thick layer of purple-black light. However, their offensive and defensive capabilities were raised to the peak in an instant. In an instant, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The magical beasts were torn to shreds by Abao's powerful claws. At the same time, a dark purple longsword shot out from Abao's chest. This longsword was not held in his hand, but launched attacks in the air on its own. Every time it attacked, it would kill at least one magical beast. It was so powerful that it became the vanguard, leading the 8 demons all the way to the hillside. Everywhere they passed, they left behind broken limbs and corpses of the magical beast. Long Haochen and his companions stood on the hilltop, but did not move an inch. Zhang Fangfang looked at Long Haochen anxiously, but he did not say anything. At this moment, although Long Haochen had a solemn expression, he appeared very calm and did not act rashly. The battlefield below was already in chaos, and the 8 demons had begun to break through forcefully. However, Long Haochen could not move at this time. His 5 companions needed time to feel the changes after the breakthrough, to feel the enhancement brought to them by their spiritual apertures and spiritual wings. Moreover, the situation below was so chaotic that even if they joined in, they would not be of any positive effect. The magical beasts were already red-eyed because Yi Xiaolei was sealed. If they joined in, they might even be treated as enemies and attacked. The life energy released by Yi Xiaolei increased their overall spiritual power, and helped Lin Xin and the others to break through to rank 6. This was a great gift that they had to repay. Moreover, even if it was not so, Long Haochen would definitely do his best to protect his companions. He had already thought it through. If there was no other way, he would bring Yi Xiaolei back to the Tower of Eternity. Of course, that was the last step, and it would not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. The reason was simple. Although the Tower of Eternity was of the light attribute, it was filled with the power of death. And once Yi Xiaolei, who was filled with life energy, entered a place like the Tower of Eternity, it was hard to say what would happen. Long Haochen turned to look at Zhang Fangfang, and said in a low voice, "Brother Zhang, if things go south later, activate the dream gem and leave, we have our own way to leave." Zhang Fangfang nodded. Looking at Long Haochen, he knew that this young leader Long was already confident, or at least he had already thought of a way out. This was related to other people's secrets, so he naturally would not ask. Looking at the battle below, Long Haochen's eyes became more and more solemn. After being buffed by Yi Xiaolei, the strength of all the magical beasts in Fantasy Paradise skyrocketed. A portion of the magical beasts directly broke through to rank 8, which was equivalent to around Class 7 human experts. Although most of them only had combat instincts, it was still extremely fierce when hundreds of magical beasts surrounded 8 people. But even under such circumstances, the battle was still like a meat grinder. Among the 8 demons, Abao was in the center position at the front. His fighting style was simple and direct. He did not dodge the attacks of the magical beasts, and he directly attacked them. Every magical beast in front of him could not escape the fate of being torn apart. At the same time, he relied on his own strength to block most of the frontal attacks, just like Long Houchen's role in the team. Beside him, there were 2 extremely strong demons. These 2 demons looked a little similar, but they did not look like humans. They looked a little like earth dragons, but their bodies were much smaller, about 2.5 meters tall, and they dragged a long tail behind them. However, being smaller than the earth dragons did not mean that their strength was lower than the earth dragons. On the contrary, these 2 fellows who launched attacks in the form of physical combat did not seem to be inferior to Abao by much. Their thick forelimbs, as well as their huge mouths that could grow into obtuse horns, were all lethal weapons. Each of them had a body full of black scales with strong defense. Just the 3 of them were able to block all the frontal attack. Behind the 8 of them, there were also 3 melee fighters. Among the 3 melee fighters, Ling Xiao was the core. The 2 demons on Ling Xiao's left and right were also somewhat similar to mutated magical beasts. One of them was majestic, like a giant bear. His body constantly emitted a dark yellow light. Whenever there were many magical beasts charging at him, he would stomp the ground hard, causing a strong shock wave. Large cracks would also appear on the ground under his bombardment. On the other side of Ling Xiao, there was a demon with a lion's head and a human's body. He also had strong offensive and defensive abilities. Yu Yi and another female demons were in the middle. They were releasing their magic. The core of the entire team was Abao, but the commander was Yu Yi. The staff in her hand had already been changed. It was dark purple in color, and rich magic waves were constantly spreading out, casting enhancement magic on the other demons, and at the same time filling up the gap. The other female demons on her side was dressed in red. She looked no different from a human, but her figure was much more voluptuous. She was wearing a soft fish-scale armor, which was propped up by her voluptuous figure. Her breasts were full like 2 big watermelons, but her waist was extremely slender, and below that was a very perky butt. This kind of figure was impossible for a human to grow. The woman held a pair of coral-like staffs in her hands, which swayed as she moved. Rays of dark red light constantly shot out from her pair of staffs, and any magical beast that was hit would suffer an extremely tragic blow. Her attack power was very strong. However, her attacks were all single target, and there were no area of effect magic spells. The cooperation of these 8 people was definitely not tacit, and it was obvious that their cooperation time was very short. However, under Yu Ye's command, there were no loopholes. Even if there were, they made up for it with their own tyrannical strength. Through this period of observation, Long Houchen discovered their secret. Except for Yu Yi and the red-haired woman in red, the external spiritual power of the other demons must be quite strong, which was why they were not at a disadvantage under the attack of so many magical beasts. Without the command of Yi Xiaolei, the attacks of the magical beasts gradually became disorderly, but the crazy attacks would inevitably cause congestion. The army of magical beasts, which had lost their brains, was constantly pushed forward by the 8 demons. No matter how crazy they were, they could not stop the advancement of these demons. Long Houchen still stood there without moving, and his eyes fell on Yu Yi from time to time. If he could command the magical beasts, he might be able to stop the enemies like before, but he could not. The only thing he could do now was to rely on the terrain and wait for the powerful demons to rush over. 2 hours was quite a long time, But these powerful demons did not seem to feel tired at all under the effect of a Bao's halo, and continued to advance step by step. With every step forward, there would be many broken bodies of magical beasts mixed with blood and internal organs flying everywhere. After Yi Xiaolei was sealed by the great prophecy spell, the number of magical beasts coming from all directions as reinforcements had decreased significantly. This was also very bad news. Kair quietly came to Long Haochen's side and whispered, "Do you want it?" Although she did not say it explicitly, Long Haochen understood what she meant. He gently shook his head and said, "Now is not the time." Kair nodded her head and didn't say anything else. Long Haochen turned to look at Han Yu and gestured to him. Han Yu immediately understood. He stood next to Long Haochen and slowly chanted a spell. At the same time, Yiting, who was behind Long Haochen, also began to chant a spell. At this time, the 8 demons had gradually advanced to the bottom of the small hill, and were only 100 meters away from the top. Of course, as they advanced, the attacks of the magical beasts became more frenzied. With Yi Xiaolei at the top, they would not retreat even if they had to pay the price with their lives. A faint golden halo spread from the top of the hill and enveloped the battlefield. Under the nourishment of this golden light, the injuries of the magical beasts were immediately healed to a certain extent, and their strength increased a little. Then, an even thicker golden light sprinkled down, and more magical beasts received a deeper level of healing. The sudden reinforcements made the magical beasts of Fantasy Paradise even more ferocious. The 8 demons' forward momentum also slowed down. These 2 spells were naturally released by Long Haochen and Han Yu. Long Haochen did not know group healing magic, but Yiting could. Although Yiting could not use magic directly, she could use it through Long Haochen after completing the spell. Ever since they met Yi Xiaolei, they seemed to have become a part of Fantasy Paradise and received the full support of Fantasy Paradise. In this case, the speed at which everyone recovered their spiritual power was much faster. Long Haochen turned around, called Chen Inger to his side, and whispered a few words to her. Chen Inger was stunned for a moment, but still nodded. The way she looked at Long Haochen also became a little more strange. Sima Xian and Wang Yuanyuan had arrived at Long Haochen's side at this time, ready to fight. A distance of 100 meters may not seem short, but in reality, in front of a strong person, it may be just a few sprints. Healing magic began to pour down from the top of the mountain. With the support of the mountain's healing magic, the magical beasts not only recovered from their injuries, but also gradually calmed down. The appearance of healing magic at the top of the mountain meant that Yi Xiaolei was fine. As long as their backbone was still there, they were not afraid of these strong enemies in front of them. Long Haochen said to Yiting, "Tell them in a language they can understand that Yi Xiaolei is only temporarily sealed. It will take time for her to wake up, at least an hour." Yiting nodded lightly and floated in front of Long Haochen. She said something in a gibberish, and her voice was transmitted far away under the influence of the light elements. Hearing Yiting's voice, the magical beasts suddenly burst into a loud roar. They seemed to be infuriated. The fact that Yi Xiaolei had been sealed up by these enemies was a great humiliation to them. Immediately their morale rose once again. With the support of the healing magic on the mountain, the attacks of the magical beasts became stronger and stronger. It was not that Long Haochen did not think of commanding these magical beasts with Yiting's help, but doing so would not have any good result. Because he was not familiar with these magical beasts, he did not know what each magical beast was good at, nor could he call out their names. If he really commanded them, the magical beasts might become even more chaotic. So, what he could do was to heal the magical beasts and increase their morale. On the other side, Chen Inger was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Madol Piglet was lying on her lap. The human and beast were communicating. Then, Chen Inger took out a few large magical crystals and placed them in front of Madol Piglet. Madol seemed to be a little afraid, but he quickly made a decision under Chen Inger's encouragement. he swallowed the few magical crystals that were clearly of the 7th grade and closed his eyes. Zhang Fangfang also joined the ranks of the healers. To be honest, his healing magic was not as good as Han Yu's. After all, he had a professional priest in his team. As a guardian knight, he did not need to spend too much effort on healing. However, he was a powerhouse at the pinnacle of the 6th grade after all. He still knew the simple Great Recovery spell. Even if he could not heal a group, he could still heal a single target. His Great Recovery spell would always fall on the more heavily injured magical beast. Together with Yuting and Han Yu's group healing, they played a supporting role to the magical beast. With their help and the stimulation of the news of Yi Xiaolei being sealed, the magical beasts forcibly stopped the charge of the 8 demons. In particular, their group healing skills were of the light attribute. When it fell on the demons, it was no different from an offensive spell. Although it could not really hurt the demons, it was still very effective in weakening a Bao's darkness skill that could strengthen all of his companions. Long Haochen looked up at the sky, then looked at Yi Xiaolei beside him. His confidence was strengthened. This was not the first time he was commanding a battle. It could even be considered a war, but this was obviously the most dangerous. Once a Bao and the other 7 charged at them, it was hard to say how long they could hold on. At least for now, their strength was not enough to hold on for too long. However, they had the help of so many powerful magical beasts on the battlefield. These magical beasts were the real main force to stop the enemy. 2 hours. They needed 2 hours. A faint light flickered, and there was a hint of coldness in Long Haochen's eyes. At this moment, a Bao happened to raise his head and look at the top of the mountain. Their gazes collided in the air, and countless sparks instantly burst forth. In terms of strength, Long Haochen was far inferior to him, but in terms of aura, he was not at a disadvantage at all. Especially in terms of mental strength, Long Haochen was not inferior to his opponent at all. A Bao looked coldly at Long Haochen on the top of the mountain. In fact, he was even more shocked than Long Haochen. He had seen Long Haochen and the others reach the top of the mountain without being stopped by any magical beast. In his opinion, this must be a conspiracy of the humans. The fact that Long Haochen could bring so many people into fantasy paradise was already beyond his expectations. Moreover, it seemed that Long Haochen and the others had a special relationship with the magical beasts in fantasy paradise. Not only were they not attacked, but they were also supported. This was also an important reason why a Bao had forced the orange-red magic of the star demons to use the Great Prophecy spell. The fact that Long Haochen and the others had reached the top made him feel a strong sense of crisis. Once Yi Xiaolei fell into their hands, all his previous actions would be in vain. Therefore, he had no choice but to sacrifice an extremely important partner and make a heavy promise. At this time, they were getting closer and closer to the top of the mountain. A Bao's judgment of the situation was especially clear. It seemed that Long Haochen and the others did not know the importance of Yi Xiaolei, and they were standing on the side of Yi Xiaolei. They simply wanted to stop them. With this discovery, a Bao felt much more relaxed. Although there were many magical beasts besieging him, he was still confident that he could reach the top of the mountain. He still remembered the injuries that Long Haochen had inflicted on him yesterday. Although he could be flexible and choose the most correct way at the critical moment, it did not mean that he would not hold a grudge. On the contrary, he had not been injured for many years. Now that he was injured by Long Haochen, how could he be willing to accept it? Looking coldly at the top of the mountain, a Bao's attack became more aggressive. Although it was slow, it was steadily attacking the direction of the mountain. Yu Yi looked at the top of the mountain from time to time. If there was anyone on the battlefield who was the most unstable, it would be her. When she saw Long Haochen joining the operation, she sighed in her heart. In her heart, she actually hoped that Long Haochen and the others would win. If Long Haochen and the others won, she would not suffer any losses. On the contrary, what if Long Haochen and the others were in a desperate situation? How would they deal with her? That terrifying murderous woman was also there, and she could take her life at any time. If she really attacked and allowed Brother Bao to complete his goal, she would most likely die. No, I have to start taking action. The star demons said that his great prophecy spell seal could only last for an hour. I have to help Long Haochen and the others buy time. Thinking of this, Yu Ye's attacks and commands gradually became weaker. Not only that, but she also made an extremely dangerous mistake and almost allowed a strong magical beast to break through their defense line. For a moment, the complete formation of the 8 demons was scattered. Of course, Yu Yi knew that she could not really stop the demons from advancing, but she was smart and naturally had her own intentions. She was telling Long Haochen that she would do her best to help them. Yu Yi, what are you doing? Bao shouted coldly. He turned around and glared at her, but quickly released a purplish-black light that fell on Yu Ye's body. Instantly, Yu Ye's aura surged, and her magical power instantly recovered to its peak state. Thank you, Brother Bao. I'm fine. Don't worry, Yu Yi said gratefully. Speaking of which, the relationship between Yu Yi and Brother Bao was very subtle. Logically speaking, she and Brother Bao should not have crossed paths, but things just happened to be so coincidental. With her half-human identity, she should not have met a Bao, but she accidentally met him. A Bao also did not know what was going on. There were countless beautiful demons for him to choose from, but he only liked Yu Yi. However, this marriage could not be truly completed. The heaven-defying demon dragon clan itself had extremely high requirements for purity of bloodline. Generally speaking, they could only marry within their own clan. Even if they married a foreign clan, they could not be regarded as the official wife. If Yu Yi was just an ordinary female demon, it would be easy to handle. To be able to become a Bao's woman, no matter which clan she belonged to, could be described as an honor or even a glory. However, Yu Ye's father was the moon demon, the second demon god of demons. She was also the moon demon's most beloved daughter. How could she become a Bao's concubine? Therefore, the relationship between the two became subtle. A Bao personally argued with the demon emperor many times for this matter. Perhaps it was because the more he could not get it, the more he desired it. On the contrary, he was even more determined to be together with Yu Yi, and said that he must make Yu Yi his official wife. Because of this, the demon emperor was furious and almost abolished his position as heir. Unfortunately, the demon emperor only had this one son. If he abolished his position as heir, then only Ling Xiao would inherit. The father and son had been fighting for this matter for nearly 2 years. When Long Haochen first met Yu Yi, it was Ling Xiao who acted as a messenger for his elder brother to deliver a message to Yu Yi. A Bao's forcefulness gradually took effect. He was the heaven-defying demon dragon clan's crown prince. Not only was he powerful, but he was also wise and intelligent. Usually, he was deeply favored by the demon emperor. For the sake of marriage, the father and son quarreled so unhappily, which was what the demon emperor did not want to see. Although Ling Xiao's talent was not bad, compared to a Bao, he was still far from it. Especially in recent years, a Bao had begun to stand out, and the ability of his bloodline was gradually revealed. His prestige in the heaven-defying demon dragon clan was gradually rising. Demons were different from humans. If a human king saw that his crown prince was too strong, he would definitely find a way to weaken the crown prince's strength and strengthen his rule. But demons were the opposite. Any ruler of demons hoped that their son could become strong as soon as possible. The best-case scenario was that he had the ability to kill him and take the throne. Therefore, the demon emperor was finally convinced by his son. That day, he looked for the moon demon to talk about the marriage. The demon emperor's compromise was also very simple. He could promise his son to marry Yu Yi as his official wife, but he required his son to choose 2 more concubines from within the clan. He also promised the clan that a Bao's future heir would be chosen from the children of the concubines. The demon god emperor's position in the demon race was extremely powerful, and his flexible way of doing things wasn't inappropriate. Even if there were some different opinions, they were quickly suppressed by the father and son, and this matter could be considered as settled. Although the demon emperor compromised with his son, it was also killing two birds with one stone in this matter. Not only did he satisfy his son's wish, but he also deepened the relationship between himself and the moon demon, making his ruling position more secure. It was because of the change in their relationship that a Bao could bring Yu Yi to participate in this operation. Otherwise, with Yu Ye's current strength, the demons could naturally choose a more suitable candidate than her. What about Yu Yi? Did she like a Bao? Whether it was the demon emperor or a Bao, they had never thought about this question. Even the moon demon had never thought about it. In their opinion, this was not a problem at all. Among the demons, who could compare to a Bao? It was precisely because a Bao had deep feelings for her that Yu Yi was fearless and dared to make a mistake at such an important moment. If it were someone else, maybe a Bao would turn around and slap them. But for her, he did not hesitate to consume his own potential to heal her. Brother Bao, you are really good to me. But why can't I like you? Perhaps I will be your wife. But I don't love you. In my heart, you are more like a brother than a husband. Yu Yi secretly thought in her heart. She could not keep making mistakes, that would be too much. Her performance became normal again. The demons continued to move forward. However, at this time, it could also be seen that the 8 demons had begun to show signs of fatigue after a long period of consumption. Yu Yi looked up at the top of the mountain and saw Long Haochen standing there at a glance. At this time, Long Haochen was staring at a Bao intently and did not see Yu Ye's gaze. Looking at him, Yu Ye's eyes suddenly became a little hazy. She did not know what kind of mentality she had towards Long Haochen, but at least she could be sure that in her heart, this young human knight definitely appeared more frequently than a Bao. What should I do? What should I do? Yu Yi secretly sighed in her heart. She had always been smart, but at this time, her heart was a little confused. Of course, Long Haochen did not know that Yu Yi was struggling in her heart, but her previous series of actions were seen in his eyes. Naturally, he understood what she meant. This woman cannot be sacrificed. Long Haochen had already made a decision in his heart. Even if the final operation failed, he could not sacrifice Yu Yi. This woman was very smart. Having such a spy among the demons was too important for the future operations of his monster hunters. Kair also saw Yu Ye's performance, but her eyes became a little cold because she happened to see Yu Yi looking at Long Haochen with some hidden bitterness. At that moment, she even had the idea of immediately activating the restriction in Yu Ye's heart. Kill her, she is a powerful threat. In terms of appearance, Yu Yi was not inferior to Kair by much, and was even more mature. Chapter 112. Women understand women the best, and women are also the most sensitive in their heart. At that moment, Kair felt that Yu Ye's feelings for Long Haochen were not ordinary. Although she had absolute trust in Long Haochen, that feeling still made her very uncomfortable. Subconsciously, she moved closer to Long Haochen. At this time, Long Haochen just turned around. Kair, listen to me. No matter what, you are not allowed to use the power of your spiritual stove, understand? If it really can't be done, we will take the risk and use the eternal melody to take Yi Xiaolei with us. Kair came back to her senses, but her pretty face was red. Fortunately, she was wearing a veil, so it was not so obvious. I am actually jealous? Long Haochen was surprised. Kair, what's wrong? Kair quickly lowered her head. I am fine, I will listen to you. Long Haochen thought she was worried about him, so he gently hugged her waist. We will do our best. No matter what the final result is, at least we have tried our best for the fantasy paradise. Kair replied softly. The jealousy in her heart inexplicably disappeared. Yes, there is no need for me to think too much. Who can take him away? He's just my fool. The battle in the field became more and more intense. When Abao noticed that the strength of his companions had begun to decline, he immediately made a decision and stopped moving forward. In this way, the pressure on them was greatly reduced in a short period of time. At the same time, purplish-black gems flew out from his chest and flew to each of his companions. These purplish-black gems seemed to be extremely nourishing for the demons. After everyone took them, their essence, chi, and spirit immediately recovered at a faster rate. Lin Xian's eyes widened. Are those the pills of the demons? I really want to get one to study. Wang Yuanyuan said impatiently. Then go. No one is stopping you. Lin Xian chuckled. You're so cruel, Yuanyuan, we're on the same side. Do you have the heart to see me walking into a tiger's den? Wang Yuanyuan giggled and said, All right, don't talk nonsense. They're getting closer. Prepare for battle. Long Haochen had already raised his brilliant sacred shield, blue rain, and hibiscus of light. After eating the purple-black gem, the 8 demons' strength had obviously recovered. Although the attacks of the demonic beasts were still fierce, they were not as fierce as before. Their numbers were constantly decreasing. Without Yi Xiaolei, not only was there no commander, but there was also no continuous support. Based on their current speed, it would take at most 10 minutes for Abao and the others to reach the top of the mountain. It had only been less than an hour since then. In other words, it was not realistic for Long Haochen and the others to hold on for more than an hour. Gently touching the eternal melody on his chest with the back of his hand, Long Haochen sighed in his heart. It seemed that he really had to make that choice. Of course, this was his last trump card. He would not use it unless it was absolutely necessary. Glancing at Yi Xiaolei, who was still surrounded by the orange light, Long Haochen suddenly remembered what he said to his father. I want to be the guardian knight, because I want to protect all the people I want to protect. Thinking of this, the serious expression on Long Haochen's face gradually relaxed. Come, since you want to come, then come. A series of orders came out of his mouth, and everyone quickly got into formation. Chen Ying-er sat in front of Yi Xiaolei. She and Yi Xiaolei were together, protected by their companions in the center. Madul Piglet seemed to be asleep and sleeping soundly. Long Haochen stood at the front, behind him was Zhang Fangfang, and then Han Yu. The 3 knights stood in a row. On Long Haochen's sides were Wang Yuanyuan and Sima Xian, while Kai quietly disappeared into the air. Lin Xian was at the back, and at this time, he had already begun to murmur a spell. Since it was released with a spell, it was definitely not an offensive spell. With every step Abao took, he would leave a deep footprint on the hill. His body had been dyed in various colors by the blood of the magical beasts, but his eyes still revealed the darkness and emptiness, as if all the killing from before had nothing to do with him. As his companions showed signs of fatigue, the purple-black gemstone could only support them for a short period of time, and Abao took the initiative to take on more responsibility. But the strength he displayed was also becoming more terrifying. The scales on his body had some damage, after all, he did not have an indestructible body. But, his attacks also became more and more fierce. When they passed the halfway point of the hill, the number of magical beasts killed by Abao alone was equivalent to the total number of magical beasts killed by the others. One by one, the magical beasts' carcasses fell and were thrown away by him. The strange demon sword had long been put away by him in order to conserve spiritual power. It must be known that although Abao had not really reached the rank 9 strength, his true internal spiritual power of cultivation was more than 50,000. In this constant consumption, he had consumed more than half of it. Of course, this was also because he was in fantasy paradise. Here, Long Haochen and the others could get double replenishment, but the demons could not get any replenishment. They could only rely on elixirs and skills to restore their spiritual power. Even so, it still did not shake Abao's belief in winning. He had sacrificed 2 companions, who were the heirs of the star demons and demons. He must succeed. As long as he could capture Yi Xiaolei and bring her back, then, Whether it was the demon emperor or him, they would definitely become the masters of the continent in the future. They were less than 50 meters away from the top of the hill. The emptiness in Abao's eyes gradually became solid. There was a special quality in him, just like the bright quality of Long Houchen. His special quality was persistence and indomitable spirit. Once he identified a goal, he would go all out to advance towards the goal, never flinching, even if he ended up with a broken head. An incompetent existence, even if he was the son of the demon emperor, would never be able to rule the demons and inherit the glory of the first demon god. Just as the distance was getting closer and they were about to reach the top of the hill, suddenly, a dark golden light burst out. That beam of dark golden light was simply too huge. The thick beam of light had a diameter of over 10 miles. The moment it appeared, the originally bright sky instantly turned dark. The moment the huge light beam rose, the sun disappeared without a trace, as if it had been shot down. The entire hill was shrouded in this dark golden light, and the entire fantasy paradise seemed to have turned dark golden. The sudden change shocked both the demonic beasts and the 8 demons. The magical beasts were only shocked, but their attacks were still as swift as before. However, the expressions of the 8 demon experts changed drastically. Even the calm, determined, and unyielding Abao couldn't help but take a few steps back at this moment. His eyes were filled with bewilderment and uncertainty. The dark golden light beam quickly completed the process of connecting the sky and the earth. Everything around it was dark, and only the dark golden light emitted from it could bring a trace of light to this world. Therefore, the changes on the dark golden light beam became more and more obvious. It was so huge that it could be clearly seen from afar. The huge dark golden light beam was engraved with countless strange runes. Most importantly, there was a giant golden black dragon crouching on this huge pillar of light. This was clearly the highest ruler of the demons, the rank of the demon emperor, the first demon god pillar. "Your Majesty, it's your Majesty." The one who spoke was the demons in the form of an earth dragon on the left of Abao. His eyes were instantly filled with fanaticism. Together with the demons on the right who looked extremely similar, they immediately knelt on the ground, ignoring the demonic beasts pouncing on them from both sides. Yes, to the demons, the demon emperor was their totem. With the demon emperor around, who could hurt them? What were these weak demonic beasts to him? They were not the only ones who knelt on the ground. There were also the 2 demons in the form of a giant bear and a raging lion on the left and right of Ling Xiao. Only Abao, Ling Xiao, Yu Yi, and the red-clad demons were bewildered. When the 4 demons knelt on the ground, the demonic beasts were also in a state of shock. At this moment, Yiting's crisp voice sounded in the air. In the elf language, there was only one simple command: attack. The demonic beasts' attacks erupted once again. At this moment, due to the 4 demons kneeling on the ground, the originally neat formation was instantly destroyed. Boom! A terrifying demonic beast in the form of a giant elephant suddenly raised its front hooves and stomped on the back of a powerful demons in the form of an earth dragon. Even though the demons had extremely strong external spiritual energy, they were already exhausted. Coupled with the shock and excitement of seeing the first demon god pillar, they did not put up any defense at all. The ear-piercing sound of bones breaking was heard. The entire chest of the powerful demons in the form of an earth dragon collapsed from the stomp. Even though it wasn't in the form of a human, it still had a vital point. At this moment, its innards had been stomped into minced meat. Even a forbidden-level healing spell might not be able to save it. Its incredulous eyes almost popped out of its eye socket. In the end it still murmured, "No, impossible. Your Majesty, have you abandoned your people?" The other expert in the form of an earth dragon was in a slightly better state because Abao had reacted in time and saved him. "That isn't the demon emperor, your Majesty. That's an illusion. Get up and fight." Unfortunately, his voice was still a little too late. Although he acted in time, There were just too many demonic beasts around. The other powerful earth dragon's arm and leg were crushed. His chest and head were also heavily injured. Although he was forcibly saved by his side, he immediately fell into a coma due to his heavy injuries. The demons at the back were relatively luckier. Leng Xiao and Yu Yi reacted quickly. Yu Yi cast a defensive spell on the giant bear. It wasn't that she didn't want to save the lion demons. It was because the lion man's defense couldn't compare to the bear man's, so saving him might not be useful. The outcome was very obvious. The lion man was torn to shreds by the demonic beasts, and the giant bear was saved. However, one of its paws had been bitten off, and it only managed to stabilize itself with Leng Xiao's frenzied counterattack. Everything happened too quickly. Even the 8 demons, Bao, who was the son of the demon emperor, couldn't react in time. On the top of the mountain, Zhang Fangfang was dumbfounded. When the dark golden pillar of light appeared, even he was shocked, let alone the demons below. However, the dark golden pillar of light was quickly fading. The demon emperor? There wasn't even a shadow of him. Madul Piglet drilled into Chen Ying-er's arms and fell into a deep sleep. That's right, this was Long Haochen's arrangement. He let Madul simulate the appearance of the demon emperor to disturb the minds of the 8 powerhouses of the demons. The final effect even exceeded Long Haochen's expectations. Madul's simulation could actually be said to be a failure. Even if it was just a simulation, the appearance of the terrifying demon god pillar when the demon emperor appeared was too difficult. It consumed 3 level 7 magic crystals to simulate a rough image, and it only lasted for a dozen seconds. One had to know that Madul's simulation could only simulate the appearance, but not the aura and pressure. At least not with his current cultivation. Even so, it still consumed a lot of energy. Even so, the powerhouses of the demons still fell for it. It was because the status of the demon emperor among the demons was too high. 2 were dead and 2 were injured. One was seriously injured and unconscious, and the other had a broken arm. Such a blow could be regarded as devastating for the entire team of demons led by a Bao. Their solid footsteps, which had been constantly moving forward, were almost stopped in an instant. They could no longer move forward at all. Not only that, the increasingly fierce attacks of the demonic beasts had caused them to be unable to resist. Long Haochen's eyes were fixed on a Bao. He did not relax even though the situation suddenly became optimistic. As the saying goes, a cornered beast will still fight, let alone the crown prince of demons. A Bao's originally empty eyes suddenly became extremely deep. The demons who were familiar with him understood that this was a situation where his anger had reached its limit. Simulating the appearance of the demon emperor was a great humiliation for the demons. Not to mention, the loss of the demons in front of him was already somewhat unbearable for a Bao. The purple-black longsword appeared again, but this time it appeared directly in a Bao's hand. His other hand was still holding the seriously injured and unconscious companion, but his killing intent had risen to an unprecedented level. Every attack was close to the peak of 10,000 points of internal spiritual energy. His external spiritual energy was also fully unleashed. One could vaguely see that the scales on his body were constantly flashing on their own. It could be said that a Bao resisted most of the attacks of the demonic beasts with his own strength. At this moment, he suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long dragon roar. His originally tall and slender body suddenly began to change rapidly. Chapter 113. A long and resonant dragon roar shook the entire area. Accompanied by that resonant dragon roar, a layer of deep purple light abruptly spread out from Po's body. It actually forced all the surrounding magical beasts to stop their attacks and retreat in fear for a brief moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the remaining 5 demons quickly gathered together. Another dragon roar sounded. At the same time when a Bao erupted, she also erupted. A rich purplish-black color spread from their bodies. At this time, the gap between their cultivation could be seen. The purplish-black light that spread from a Bao's body was obviously much stronger than Ling Zhao's. That purple-black long sword floated up from Po's hand. Along with his body floating down, Po's entire body began expanding speedily. Scales grew bigger and thicker, and the sense of power released from his body, which was already strong, became even more solid. Although his internal spiritual fluctuations didn't seem to have increased much, it gave people a strong sense of danger. His huge wings spread from his back, and his 4 claws landed on the ground. His majestic, ferocious, and terrifying appearance was brazenly presented on the mountainside. With a powerful dragon roar to the sky, a Bao's body expanded a few more times. From head to toe, his body was now more than 10 meters long. Yu Yi lowered her head slightly. No one saw the disgust that flashed in her eyes. In her heart, no matter how powerful a Bao was, no matter how high his status was among the demons, he still had the original body of the heaven-defying demon dragon. In other words, the current him was the real him. On the other hand, Yu Yi treated herself more like a human. The original body of the Moon Devils was almost the same as a human. Especially since she had human blood, she maintained a certain degree of disgust toward most demons. When a Bao ordered the heir of the star demons to cast the great prophecy spell, Yu Yi felt a chill in her heart. At that time, she felt that if a Bao encountered a life crisis one day, as his wife, would she be abandoned by him? For the demons who only cared about benefits, this was very likely to happen. But what if I'm that person's wife? What would he do? A woman's thoughts were always different from a man's. In this tense battlefield, Yu Ye's imagination actually ran wild. Furthermore, this thought was growing rapidly in her heart like mushrooms after a spring rain. When she raised her head to look at a certain someone at the top of the mountain, her gaze was much more fervent. The situation on the mountainside changed very quickly. Compared to the surrounding magical beasts, the 10-meter-long heaven-defying demon dragon did not have much of an advantage in terms of size. However, its true strength was not something that the ordinary level 7 and level 8 magical beasts could compare to. This was especially so when the last boost that Yi Xiaolei gave them was quickly disappearing. Po raised his head and let out a dragon roar towards the sky. That purple-black long sword of his suddenly descended from the sky and landed directly on Po's forehead, transforming into a meter-long purple-black horn. Po then widely opened his mouth and let out a purple-black stream of air towards Po's face. A loud explosion rang out, and at least 3 gigantic magical beasts were sent flying. Their bodies disintegrated rapidly in the air and melted in the blink of an eye. After spitting out this breath, one could vaguely see a layer of purplish-black flames burning on the horn on a Bao's forehead. He suddenly spread his wings and stuck close to the mountain wall, pouncing towards the top of the mountain. The moment before he pounced, he turned back to look at Yu Yi and nodded to her. Of course, Yu Yi understood what he meant. With a thought, she shouted, "Be careful." Bao felt very good when he heard this word. Receiving the concern of his beloved woman, even if he was trapped in a tight encirclement, his fighting spirit became even higher. However, this shout had a different meaning in Long Haochen's ears. This was because a Bao, whose back was facing Yu Yi, did not see that when she shouted, she was looking at Long Haochen. A Bao erupted. After revealing his original form, his strength skyrocketed again, as if he had returned to his previous peak state. Not only that, the power of his external spiritual power was also increased to the extreme. Although the total amount was still 20,000, the strength of his physical body was far from what it could be compared to when he was in his human form. When the magical beasts that blocked the way collided with him, they were directly smashed into pieces. Especially the horn on his forehead, it was even more indestructible. Long Haochen took a deep breath and slowly took a step forward. A thick golden fog rose around his body. He was accumulating power. Not only him, the same fog also appeared on Han Yu and Wang Yuanyuan. The skill, accumulating power, could be learned by any close combat profession. For an ordinary warrior or knight, it might be very useless, but in the hands of Long Houchen, it could be changed into countless ways of fighting. Sima Xian slightly took half a step back. He did not accumulate power, but the vigorous light pill in his hand quickly coiled. Lin Xian's incantation was still ongoing from the moment he started chanting. From this, it could be seen that his incantation was very difficult. One could clearly see that his forehead was already covered with sweat. He had just broken through to the 6th rank, but chanting this incantation was still very difficult. Kai was still nowhere to be seen. Chun Ying-er's incantation had already begun. She held the crystal ball with both hands and began to release the living soul gate. The 8 of them each had their own specialties, but they all displayed their strongest strength in the battle. They wanted to do their best to resist the enemy's attack. Zhang Fangfang's gaze also became focused. He also knew the skill, accumulating power, but he did not use it. Instead, he stood there quietly, gazing at a Bao who was crazily slaughtering the magical beasts and rushing towards the top of the mountain. His whole body seemed to have entered a strange state. Dense golden light quickly liquefied and covered his whole body. One could clearly see that his left hand holding the shield had unexpectedly become transparent. The body of glorious light was the symbol of a 7th rank knight. Although Zhang Fangfang's strength had not yet reached the 7th rank, he was at the peak of the 6th rank. Relying on the operation and control of his own spiritual power, he was actually able to use the powerful ability of a knight with great difficulty. Closer, a Bao was getting closer and closer. After returning to his original form, none of the magical beasts present could stop him from advancing. Everyone knew that he was under great pressure. However, there was no doubt that as long as he caught Yi Xiaolei, Long Houchen and the others would still suffer a great loss. A Bao's purplish-black dragon eyes were filled with endless coldness and anger. The pressure he was under was far greater than that of Long Houchen. Behind him, whether it was Yu Yi or Leng Xiao, he definitely could not abandon them. Furthermore, so many of his companions had fallen this time. If he could not bring Yi Xiaolei back, his reputation would definitely be greatly affected. His father would definitely punish him severely. Under such circumstances, a Bao had no other choice. He could only try his best. He also believed that he had the strength to do so. Could Long Houchen and the others stop him? That was impossible. He did not have any thoughts of revenge in his mind. His only target was Yi Xiaolei. Finally, he was less than 5 meters away from the top of the mountain. His heavy breathing, which was filled with a dark aura, could already be heard by Long Houchen. The moment he raised his head, he happened to come into contact with Long Houchen. A Bao could see through the golden haze very clearly. Of course, he knew what these humans were doing. Even so, what was the big deal? He had already gone through such a difficult process. Was there a need for an explosion at the last moment? Boom! The purplish-black flames burning on the horn on a Bao's forehead instantly spread to his entire body, causing it to be engulfed in flames. This was the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's innate skill, heaven-defying. With this skill, he could erupt with even more terrifying combat power in a short period of time. Even though the rules of the illusory paradise were suppressing him greatly. However, the moment the purplish-black flames started burning, the air around his body began to distort violently. He was actually temporarily shielding himself from the restraints of the illusory paradise's rules. This time, of course, could not be too long. However, to him it was enough. The terrifying purplish-black light suddenly blossomed in all directions, sending all the magical beasts that were pouncing towards him flying. He spread his wings again and boldly pounced towards Long Houchen above. Long Houchen had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Behind him, Yiting's voice was a little hoarse from chanting too hastily. The golden light on Long Houchen's body was already as strong as his pair of spiritual wings. The Son of Light, he was the true Son of Light. Gripping the hilt of blue rain and hibiscus of light with both hands, he took a step forward with his left foot. Facing the pouncing Abao, he gripped the sword with both hands and slashed down. This slash seemed to follow a mysterious principle. The distorted light flickered around Long Houchen's body, and his entire body seemed to have entered an ethereal state. This slash didn't seem domineering at all, but it was untraceable like an antelope hanging its horn. However, the moment he slashed with his sword, the surrounding light seemed to darken, as if all the light elements had been absorbed by his sword. At this moment, it seemed like only the light shining on his body was golden. In the sky, a faint golden light shone down from the sun, shining on Long Houchen's body. On his forehead 9 purple veins appeared, but in an extremely short period of time, they completely turned golden. This was Long Houchen's sword of understanding. It wasn't just an all-out effort, but a complete understanding. In the face of such immense pressure, Long Houchen seemed to have entered a special state at this moment. It was just a simple slash, but he seemed to have also transcended the rules of the illusory paradise. Poof! Blue rain and hibiscus of light collided with the heaven-defying demon dragon crown Prince Abao's horn on his forehead. The air seemed to have stopped in an instant, and the attacks of all the people and beasts in the surroundings also stopped for a moment. There was no light spreading, but it could be clearly seen that the golden light on Long Houchen's body and the purplish-black flames on the heaven-defying demon dragon crown Prince Abao's body were extinguished at the same time. Even the light in their eyes dimmed in an instant. Not to mention the demons, even Long Houchen's companions were dumbfounded. None of them expected that Long Houchen could actually slash out a slash that even Abao wanted to extinguish. Buzz! A strange buzzing sound rang at the same time from the horn on Abao's forehead and the blue rain and hibiscus of light in Long Houchen's hands at the same time. Countless blue and golden light spots sprinkled in front of Long Houchen, turning into spots of light that spread in the air. On the other side, a crisp cracking sound came from the top of Abao's head. A crack from the top to the root instantly spread down. Roar! As if it had received a fatal injury, Abao suddenly let out a roar of pain, and its huge body rose high into the air. At this moment, the attacks of Long Houchen's companions arrived. First, it was Wang Yuanyuan's Divine Giant Soul Shield. The Divine Giant Soul Shield, which had transformed into a giant axe, slashed at Abao's body with the terrifying power of Azura slash. Without the protection of the purplish-black flames, a huge wound appeared on Abao's body. Following that was Han Yu's Azura stab, and even though Abao tried his best to protect himself, his left wing was still pierced by the Azura stab. At this moment, the powerful ball of light roared out, and with a loud bang, it slammed into Abao's body, causing his 10M body to be sent flying. Sima Xian's crush and ripple of light were executed to their limits, and he even had his priest's attack skills. The scales on Abao's body were shattered, and a large patch of flesh appeared. This was the full power of 4 Type 6 powerhouses. After clashing with Long Houchen, Abao seemed to have fallen into an extremely weakened state, and even his defenses had disappeared. That was why he was sent flying. However, it had to be said that his willpower was shocking, and his heart was unyielding. Even when his body was sent flying, a purplish-black crystal shot out from his mouth. It was not aimed at Long Houchen, but towards Yi Xiaolei. The moment he was sent flying, Abao felt that he was about to fail, but he was not resigned to it. If he could not obtain it, no one else could. He wanted to destroy her. A pitch-black figure appeared noiselessly above Abao's body, and countless rays of cold white light mixed with a dark gold glow fused into one. It viciously pierced through the back of Abao's neck, and went straight for his brain. Kair had finally appeared. She had hidden in the air, and appeared when Abao was at his weakest. This was a mission given to her by Long Houchen, and Long Houchen had told Kair that she could only attack when Abao was pushed back. This was an attack that had been tempered 1,000 times. After breaking through to the Type 6 realm, Kai Er's spiritual furnace had evolved to the second level. The second level could only be described as spiritual furnace of 1,000 strikes as one. With this attack, coupled with Kai Er's overlord thrust, her attack power was at its peak. Among the 6 great temples, the Assassin Temple was undoubtedly the one that understood the weaknesses of the demons the most. The toughest part of the heaven-defying demon-dragon race was their heads, and in order to truly kill them, their brains had to be destroyed. Only by attacking from the back of the neck could it be possible to destroy their brains. Abao, who was in a weakened state, was suddenly stabbed in the vital part, and immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His huge body suddenly erupted with an indescribable force, and with a crisp shattering sound, a black token shattered into pieces in the air. Then, a force that seemed to come from ancient times suddenly erupted, and Kai Er's body was forcibly shaken off. In the end, her dagger was unable to truly pierce into Abao's brain. On the other side, at the top of the mountain, Chun-Ing Er's incantation had already been completed a moment ago. Her luck was not bad, and this time, she had summoned a level 6 demonic beast. This demonic beast immediately rushed to the path of the purplish-black bead, but it only stayed there for a moment, and then it turned into ashes and disappeared into the air. A ray of fiery red light abruptly appeared, and directly landed on the ground. This ray of fiery red light looked very strange, and it turned out to be a human-shaped energy body. The moment it appeared, an indescribable majesty also appeared. In his hand there was only a huge shield, even larger than Wang Yuanyuan's giant soul god shield. Lunge block. There was no rumble, only a strange spiritual shock wave, and in the next moment, the fiery red figure also disappeared. This was a level 7 defensive spell that Lin Xian did not hesitate to pay a huge price to consume a precious elixir that could only be consumed by him, and in order to cast the fire god's shield. This was a spell that had a certain level of intelligence. However, facing the purplish-black bead, it was still annihilated. However, the fire god's shield was, after all, known as the strongest fire defensive spell below the level 8. After the purplish-black bead destroyed it, its radiance clearly dimmed, and it no longer looked as dazzling as before. Wang Yuanyuan was the closest to Yi Xiaolei, and she did not even think about it, and raised the giant soul god shield in her hand to block in front of Yi Xiaolei. In reality, she, who had just used all her power by accumulating power, did not have much spiritual power to support her giant soul god shield. At this time, the 21st general-level monster hunters did not even have anyone to help her resist. Ever since Long Haochen slashed out with his sword, he stood there motionless, as if he was under a paralysis spell. Sima Xian, Han Yu, Lin Xian, and Chun-Ing had all used up their respective abilities, and could not help her. Kai was also in the process of hunting down the strongest enemy, Abao. Everything happened too quickly. Who would have thought that Abao could still release such a terrifying attack? Wang Yuanyuan was very clear about what she was going to face, but she still stood in front of Yi Xiaolei. She could not let the efforts of her companions go to waste. Right now, she could only rely on the life-sharing of the soul chain. As for whether her body could withstand this attack, it was no longer within her calculations. So what if she died in battle? This girl with the personality of a boy never knew what fear was. At this time, a tall figure suddenly blocked all the light, blocking in front of Wang Yuanyuan. All Wang Yuanyuan saw was a broad shoulder. It's him. Wang Yuanyuan was slightly stunned, and in the next moment, the strong body in front of her ruthlessly crashed into her giant soul god shield. Blood splattered in the air. That's right, the person in front of Wang Yuanyuan was Zhang Fangfang. The shield in his hand was completely shattered, and at the same time, his hands that were holding the shield were also shattered. One could clearly see the white stubble of his bones. All 10 of them were broken, and the broken bones were only connected to his hands by a bit of skin and flesh. Not only that, but his arms also fell limply to the ground. Even the armor on his chest was pierced by a few pieces of the shield. The blood was flowing out from his hands and chest. The rich golden light dissipated in an instant, and Zhang Fangfang fell on top of Wang Yuanyuan. His pupils seemed to be expanding in an instant. Wang Yuanyuan was stunned. At this moment, she was really a little sluggish. She was not afraid of death, but it was the first time that her life was saved by someone. When Zhang Fangfang stood in front of her, she clearly saw the penetrating gold on the left hand of his shield. The body of radiant light was already very close to the 7th rank. But even so, he was still so desperate to block that attack. What if that purplish-black bead had shot into her giant soul god shield? At this moment, an incomparably majestic aura appeared in the fantasy paradise, and the sky really darkened this time. However, it only darkened for a moment. Suddenly, an intense green light erupted from the ground and collided with the black light. In the void, a crack appeared, and a strong suction force appeared in an instant. The heavily injured Abao and the remaining few demons were forcibly sucked into the crack and disappeared. Goddess of nature, I will come again. Your godhead is mine. A gentle and calm voice was filled with majesty, as if it could command the heavens and the earth. Everyone in the captain level number 21 Monster Hunters was very familiar with this voice, because this was the voice of the Demon Emperor. He was actually able to forcibly tear open the barrier of the fantasy paradise and rescue Abao and the others. As if stimulated by this voice, the green light in the fantasy paradise suddenly became stronger. The black crack disappeared in an instant, and all the darkness in the space was swept away. Only 7 or 8 balls of white light floated in the air. These were the spiritual stoves left behind by the few dead demons. They floated in the air amidst the roars of the beasts. All the filth seemed to disappear with the departure of the darkness. The beasts gradually calmed down after a series of angry roars, and looked sadly at the corpses of their companions. The rising green light also gradually weakened, and gradually returned to its original appearance. Han Yu, Lin Xian, hurry up and save him. Wang Yuanyuan's anxious shout broke the momentary silence. Han Yu and Lin Xian quickly turned to look, and when they saw Zhang Fangfang's tragic appearance, they could not help but gasp. Zhang Fangfang was not unconscious, but his face was pale. He was lying in Wang Yuanyuan's arms at this time, and he forced a smile. It's okay, I won't die yet. Although he said it casually, the constant twitching of the corners of his mouth and the spasms of his body betrayed him. Lin Xian quickly stuffed 2 elixirs into his mouth, while Han Yu gathered a healing magic that had just recovered and cast it on Zhang Fangfang, helping to temporarily stabilize his injuries. However, the two did not stop. They nodded apologetically to Zhang Fangfang, and quickly returned to Long Haochen's side. Yes, they could see that there was something wrong with Long Haochen. The battle had already ended, and Long Haochen, who had unleashed a heaven-shattering slash and truly stopped Abao from capturing Yixiaolei, did not know how he was doing now. He just stood there, and his eyes seemed to be empty. His empty gaze gazed into the distance, and his entire body maintained the posture of a slash, like a statue standing on a hill. No one dared to touch him, because they were all afraid that he would scatter into the air like the shattered blue rain or the hibiscus of light. Yiting also floated there in a daze, and rays of healing magic were continuously released from her body, landing on Long Haochen's body. As a light elemental spirit, although her magic could not attack the enemy, nor could it assist others, it could directly affect her master's body. However, no matter how she healed him, and no matter how many rays of golden light rose from Long Haochen's body, he still stood there motionlessly. The only thing that made everyone feel slightly relieved was that the scattered blue and gold light spots of the blue rain and hibiscus of light in the air were slowly fusing into his body from his chest, showing that he had not truly collapsed. Kai stood quietly in front of Long Haochen, looking at him. Her gaze seemed very calm, but if one looked closely, they would discover that her usually steady hands were actually trembling. Who else could be more concerned about Long Houchen's condition than her? She had seen that slash very clearly. It was like the horns of an antelope and the movement of the stars. That slash had completely surpassed the realm of Long Houchen. It was not a skill that belonged to any of Long Houchen's original skills. That slash was completely a form of enlightenment. This was definitely not an ability that Long Houchen could use in his normal state. The only explanation was his state at the time. Pressure, environment, enlightenment, and the stimulation of a Bao's unceasing advance. All these combined factors, and with the help of the light elemental spirit Yiting, he had fused with the entire illusory paradise. That seemingly calm, but earth-shattering slash. However, no one knew what kind of price Long Houchen had to pay to unleash that slash. This world is fair. When you gain something, you are bound to lose something else. For example, professionals possess great strength, but lose the time to enjoy life in the mortal world. Kair, what do we do? Chen Inger anxiously asked Kair. Kair took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down as much as possible. Don't worry everyone, let's first recover our spiritual power. Han Yu, continue to help Zhang Fangfang with his treatment. Long Houchen, none of us can touch him right now. We can only wait. Sima Xian was a bit impatient. Then how long do we have to wait? Kair coldly glanced at him. Don't tell me I'm not more anxious than you? This is illusory paradise. Naturally, we have to wait for Yi Xiaolei to wake up. We are fighting for her. She is the most familiar with this place. Sima Xian froze. He nodded and didn't say anything else. If Long Houchen could be said to be convincing to his companions, then Kair could be said to be dignified. The one everyone admired the most was Long Houchen, but the one they feared the most was Kair. Although Kair's words were slightly reprimanding, Sima Xian felt that it was only natural. Back when they were carrying out the Wailing Howl Cave mission, when Long Houchen wasn't around, Kair had unleashed her full strength to save everyone. Because of this, she had lost her 4 senses for 7 whole months. She definitely deserved to be the vice-captain. Therefore, in the team, although the trust in her was not as high as Long Houchen's, in terms of authority, she was not any less than Long Houchen's. Whenever Long Houchen couldn't command the team, she would be able to smoothly take over. The roars of the magical beasts gradually subsided. They faced the direction of the mountain peak and crouched down. Not a single one of them wanted to climb up. She looked at Long Houchen, Kair and the others with a very gentle gaze. It was obvious that she had completely approved of them. Gradually, the strange pale green light carried the 7 or 8 spiritual stoves up until they reached the top of the mountain. No one tried to absorb these spiritual stoves. Instead, they all sat down cross-legged quietly. Seeing that her companions weren't greedy for these treasures, Kair's gaze softened. This was a group of companions that could be completely trusted. She subconsciously looked at Sima Xian, whom she had reprimanded earlier. Sima. Ah. Sima Xian looked at her doubtfully. Kair said, I'm not in a good mood. Don't mind me. Sima Xian instantly froze. The others couldn't help but look at Kair strangely. The atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. Kair turned her head away, and her gaze once again fell on Long Houchen. Sima Xian instantly turned to look at Lin Xian and said in a low voice, I didn't hear wrong, did I? The vice-captain just apologized to me? Lin Xian looked at him with disdain and said, Look at you. I think it's better for the vice-captain to scold you. Yes, I feel more at ease that way. Sima Xian surprisingly didn't refute Lin Xian's words. Instead, he nodded in agreement. The illusory paradise gradually returned to normal. Strangely, the skeletons of the demonic beasts gradually melted into the ground. The originally heavy smell of blood was also gradually washed away by the fresh air. Time passed. Long Houchen still remained the same. There were no changes. The orange light on Yi Xiaolei's body gradually faded. Finally, with a soft pop sound, the last layer of light collapsed, turning into specks of light that dissipated into the air. Because of Long Houchen, no one could truly continue cultivating. Everyone immediately stood up when Yi Xiaolei broke through the seal of the great prophecy spell. Of course, Zhang Fangfang was an exception. With Han Yu's treatment and Lin Xian's elixirs, his injuries could only be considered to be stabilized. However, he still looked very weak, especially the injuries on his fingers and arms. Even a high-ranking priest couldn't do anything about a severed limb. Medical treatment was needed. Han Yu could only use light magic to maintain the vitality of his severed limb so that it wouldn't die. At this moment, he was unconscious in Wang Yuanyuan's arms. Wang Yuanyuan's lips were tightly pursed. Her heart was in a mess. In her mind, the scene of Zhang Fangfang resolutely standing in front of her kept replaying, and the calmness in his eyes after he was seriously injured. For a knight, such a serious injury to his arm was a fatal blow, but he could still comfort others. Yi Xiaolei jumped up from the ground. Without saying a word, she slapped both her hands at Zhang Fangfang and Long Houchen at the same time. 2 balls of gentle green light shot out from her palms and landed on both of them. Zhang Fangfang snorted and quickly woke up from his coma. The pink and tender Yi Xiaolei came in front of him. Her small hands, which were full of spiritual orifices, moved quickly. Her movements were fast, but strangely coordinated. Under the cover of the rich green light, she continuously reconnected Zhang Fangfang's severed limbs. What was even more strange was that wherever her hands touched, the wounds would quickly heal and reconnect. Zhang Fangfang's heavy injuries were healing at an astonishing speed. Lin Xian whispered in surprise, "This is life magic." Sima Xian asked in a low voice, "What is life magic? Why haven't I heard of it?" Lin Xian said, "Your brain is full of muscles. What can you know? Life magic is a kind of lost magic. It doesn't have any attack power, but it is cast with life force. In terms of healing ability, you light priests are trash in front of life magic." Sima Xian snorted. "That's a big blow. I'll tell my teacher later." Ever since the competition that day, he received Ling Zhao's recognition and directly became a disciple of Ling Zhao. Although he originally had a teacher, it didn't affect him in the temple of the priests. Just like Long Houchen's teacher, Yi Hua wasn't the only one. Han Qiu and his father could also be considered as his teachers. While they were talking, Yi Xiaolei's treatment on Zhang Fangfang was completed. Finally, she shot a ball of green light into his chest. Then, she quietly retreated. Meanwhile, Zhang Fangfang fell into a coma again. Long Houchen was also bathed in a layer of green light. However, he still didn't change and maintained his original appearance. Yi Xiaolei frowned slightly. She came in front of him and pointed her right forefinger at Long Houchen's chest. Kai Er's hands had already subconsciously clenched. Seeing Long Houchen's dazed state filled her heart with panic. She just suppressed it and didn't show it. At this time, Yi Xiaolei finally removed the seal. If even she couldn't do anything, then it would be troublesome. A gentle green light lit up on Yi Xiaolei's fingertip. However, in the next moment, a rich golden light flashed violently from Long Houchen's chest. It actually repelled her finger. Yi Xiaolei cried out in surprise. She moved closer and raised her 2 small hands in an attempt to tear off the radiant holy armor on Long Houchen's body. However, she was really too short and couldn't reach it. It was really a funny sight. A little girl with makeup hanging on Long Houchen's armor. "Let me help you," Kai said hurriedly. She immediately took off Long Houchen's radiant holy armor. When Yi Xiaolei pulled the front of Long Houchen's robe and saw the eternal melody on his chest, her expression changed. She raised her right hand again. She reached out with her index finger and drew a few lines in the air. This time, it wasn't a simple green light. A ball of green flames danced between her fingers. She tried to touch the eternal melody again. The dense golden light burst forth once again and forcefully pushed her finger away. Long Houchen, who had been maintaining that posture all this time, trembled a little. Yi Xiaolei's expression turned ugly. She glanced at Kai and snorted. The dignified son of light actually received the inheritance of that kind of person.